This is Gae Yoon, the youngest president of the elite warrior school, and the only one who won every single duel in the academy. When a boy shows up completely beaten up, challenging her to a sparring match, Gae Yoon was surprised. Since it was basically a guaranteed win, she accepted. Everyone headed to the makeshift room where the fight would take place. Gae Yoon, fully confident, walked in slowly radiating power, and in a split second she threw a kick that would have landed on anyone, but somehow the boy managed to dodge it. That one dodge was enough to make everyone in the room hold their breath. She started throwing attack after attack, and the boy managed to dodge every single one with ease. Gae Yoon realized she couldn't land a single hit on him, said it had been a long time since someone dodged her attacks for this long, and offered a draw. For the best fighter in the school to not be able to touch a beaten-up boy was straight up embarrassing. When the boy refused the draw, she got angry and went at him with everything she had. The moment she got close to him, she almost got hit by a dangerous kick that could have cost her the whole fight. The boy didn't stop there. Even though he wasn't at 100%, he was fighting on equal terms with Gae Yoon, and that shocked her. He decided to fight seriously, and said he would use every last bit of energy left in his body. At lightning speed, he started throwing a chain of kicks that she could barely dodge. With his energy running out, he decided to put everything into one single powerful attack. But the instructor outside saw things were getting dangerous, and ended the fight, stopping the boy's final attack. She was shocked because she knew that if he had been at full strength, she would have lost. She walked away with one question on her mind. Who the fuck is that guy? This is Jae Young. She didn't know him because in the past he only used his power when he had no other choice. Day to day, he was just another regular school kid with only one goal: to help his father. Many had already forgotten, but this is the great hero Song. When planet Earth was attacked by monsters and demons, Song unlocked a power that no one had ever achieved before. Thanks to that power of his planet Earth, managed to return to normal. But nowadays, to survive, Jae Yoon works as a dungeon smuggler, illegally entering restricted zones, collecting forbidden items, and delivering them to clients who pay well. He's done this 371 times. One day on the job with his boss Jae Yoon, a client got angry, saying he wanted the best warrior, and told the MC to get lost. When the boy calls him an old idiot, the client lost it and sent his bodyguard to teach the MC a lesson. The guy was a tank-class fighter, his body trained to the absolute limit. The giant walked up to the boy and tried to land a punch on him, but the boy dodged it with ease. The giant was impressed and came back with an even harder punch, but took a kick straight to the chin that crashed his windows. The old man was speechless watching the boy fight. The Gigachad woke up furious, pushing his body to the absolute max with everything he had. Now he can take bullets, aerial bombs, and still walk away without a scratch. The guy turned into an armored titan. When he attacks, only Jaryong dodges because he knows he can't afford to take a punch from this beast. While he kept dodging, his master told him to wrap it up already. The Scully smiles, grabs a piece of iron, and the moment Chris Bumpston attacks him, Jaryong with unreal strength lands a punch right in this tank's face that sent him straight to dreamland. The bald guy who underestimated him now knows this boy is way stronger than he looks. When he was a kid, he would just watch his father train. Shong had a unique power and it fascinated him. The boy started spending every single day training alongside his father, growing stronger with each passing day, until he reached the level of power he's at today. After the confrontation, Dae Yoon revealed to the bald guy that the price had gone up, doubled now. The guy looked at the boy and accepted on the spot. The boy was calmly drinking water when he found out the mission was in the city of Yudo, a city taken over by the most dangerous monsters in the world, Imperial Wasps. Some time ago, the government assembled a task force that managed to kill the queen. One of the 7 adventurers stole the royal jelly, the liquid the wasps used to create a new queen, and fled to the Yggdra forest. Today he's considered dead. When Jawan said that this royal jelly can bring someone back from the brink of death and cure any disease, Jawan got excited because this could save his father, who has an incurable poison eating away at his body. The MT grabs all his gear and opens the gate to the toughest mission of your life. Yu Jaryong steps into a mountain area and shields his eyes from the bright sun. Ever since adhesion dungeons appeared across the world, 2 in Korea stood out as the biggest. One was Jejudo, a dungeon merged with a volcanic mountain range. The other had fused with the Yggdra jungle, and that was where the boy was getting ready to explore. The Yggdra dungeon sits in what used to be Uido, right in Seoul. With Uido at its center, Mapo, Yongsan, and nearby areas all fell under its control, and most of it is still unexplored. A lot of this region is only D rank, but Uido itself, where the wasp is S rank. That's where the person carrying the jelly tried to move it before heading to the meeting point in Borama. Zhaobait explains that after reaching Borama, the transporter lost contact. He might have died, but that's not the only option. Either way, Zhaobait just needs to reach the spot and recover the royal jelly. Before Yoamc leaves, Zhaobait stops him and tells him again not to lose focus, just do the job. Putting on his mask with a grin, the boy asks if his boss thinks he'd run away. Zhaobait Morinsat Wan answers that he knows the kid isn't dumb enough for that. Then his boss tells him one more thing: be careful. The royal jelly is priceless, and humans aren't the only ones ready to die for it. After that warning, the boy uses a rope to climb down the cliff and enter the forest. Once he reaches the middle of it, he figures the whole place can probably smell that strange scent. Then he looks down and something makes him freeze in shock and irritation. In the dirt is a huge footprint. Zhao Beiyong realizes all kinds of creatures will be drawn in by the jelly smell. Deeper in the woods, birds suddenly burst into the air as a pointed-eared girl runs through the trees, completely out of breath. She stops behind a tree for a second to catch her breath. Her name is Jin Sarum, a first-year warrior facing the worst moment of her life. This dungeon trip was supposed to be an easy intermediate exam, but she's frozen with fear. Instead of a simple test, she ran into a monster that should never have been there. The thing chasing her is a giant beast. Jin tries to stay still and quiet, hoping the creature will pass her by. But then a gust of wind heads her way, and she realizes the truth she didn't want to face. This exam was supposed to be easy. She only had to gather as many coins as possible before time ran out. Even if the test was meant to feel like real combat, the area was set to the lowest rank and should have been simple. It was beginner training, something any new adventurer should clear. Then the monster sneaks right up behind her, grinning when she finally notices it. Jin panics. The monsters here were supposed to be weak and stupid, but this one clearly isn't. The four-armed giant swings at her with overwhelming force, and she barely dodges. Running won't work, not against something that big. She has to choose another option. In that moment, all she can do is hope for a miracle, so she pulls out her bow and grabs 3 arrows. Even with the odds against her, Jin decides to fight. The 3-star primal titan starts charging a brutal breath attack. Desperate to stay alive, she fires all 3 arrows, but the monster calmly raises a hand and blocks them with ease. Jin realizes its hide is tougher than a tank, and her chances are almost zero. Then the primate swings one of its 4 arms into the ground, sending wind and rocks flying everywhere. She escapes again with quick movement, and even while airborne, Jin gets another arrow ready. She knows her arrows can't really pierce it, but she has no choice. 3 more shots fly out, this time boosted by wind. They only scratch the titan, and it doesn't even flinch. Staring at it, Jin realizes she never needed to kill it with those shots. She only wanted to lure it closer and make it drop its guard for 1 second. Now she knocks another arrow, this one filled with fire. Sure, her plan might work. When she lands, she pours even more magic into it, because her class lets her load magic into the tips of arrows. With everything on the line, Jin steels herself to strike back. Using her flame bombardier skill, she fires a blazing shot that rips across the ground. The magic she can place in an arrow has almost no limit, so for her last move, she chooses the biggest explosion she can make. The shot hits, and a huge blast lights up the forest. She stares at the impact point, trying to see if the monster is finally dead. That attack should have killed any monster with a 3-star threat level, but when the smoke clears, Jin is horrified. The monster survived by clinging to 2 trees, it barely escaped, and now it looks furious, enraged that its prey dared fight back. Even her strongest move meant nothing, if it didn't land cleanly. Her thoughts spiral, and Jin starts to believe she might die here. Before she can decide to run, the monster drops to the ground and charges straight at her. Jin turns and bolts the other way, trying to escape, while the titan chases her with a crazed look like it's enjoying the hunt. Then, like a miracle, our protagonist suddenly appears and slams his weapon into the titan. Jin looks up in disbelief, staring at her savior like he's a hero. Still airborne, Jaryong meets the eyes of the girl he just saved, while Jin can barely process what happened. The giant took a hard hit to the chin and staggers, still trying to keep its balance. He lands safely on a tree, and thinks that even a clean shot to the chin wasn't enough. Looking down, he notices the beast staring up at him with a vicious glare. He pulls a strange item from his pocket, an adventurer tool that looks like a weapon, with bait in one hand, and the tool in the other. The boy rushes in to bring the beast down. Watching this, Jin is stunned. She never thought anyone would charge that monster head-on. To her, he's running straight to his death, and the furious titan attacks with 2 arms at once. Jaryong shouts for her to close her eyes right now. She doesn't understand why, but he quickly aims the tool at the monster's face. They're seconds from a deadly clash where only one can survive. Then the tool in Jaryong's hand starts giving off a powerful light, and he shuts his own eyes. A blinding flash bursts right in front of the monster, lighting up the forest and leaving the titan temporarily blind. Sairam follows his warning, closing her eyes and raising an arm to shield herself. The monster has no idea what happened and is fully hit by the blast of light straight to its eyes. It roars in rage as the protagonist lands, thinking that tool is spent now, and it was his last one. The item he used is called a stunlight, a tool made from the scales of an oscillating fish found in deep ocean dungeons. Its special effect, incapacitate, made it worth the cost, so adventurers loved it, but because it worked too well, people abused it, and many ended up losing their eyesight. That's why making them is now completely banned. Even with her eyes shut, Sairam was still affected by how strong the flash was, so she slowly starts opening them again. As he runs past her with his baton, Yu Jaryong tells her he bought her a few seconds, and now she needs to survive on her own. MC thinks that as long as he doesn't directly help an adventurer too much inside the dungeon, he probably won't get reported. He remembers his boss saying smugglers are like cockroaches to adventurers, and since the reward for turning one in is huge, one careless move could get him sold out to the government. He had no plan to get involved any further, but while running, Jaryong noticed something that made him tense up. Someone was following right behind him. It was the girl from earlier. Realizing she was chasing him, he groaned, unsure what she wanted. Even though she was out of breath, Anisha kept running after the boy who saved her, determined to thank him. But after everything he'd learned about not getting tricked, he made up his mind and burst forward. In a split second, Anisha lost sight of him completely. She freezes in confusion, sure he was just there a moment ago. Then her guard drops, and a baton slams into her neck, knocking her back. Jaryong forces her to the ground and calls her an idiot, demanding to know what she was trying to do. Anisha quickly says she meant no harm. She only chased him to thank him for saving her. The protagonist coldly asks if she really expects him to believe that. He's not dumb enough to fall for it. Then she admits there was more to it. She knew he was a smuggler. Still, she says she wasn't trying to catch him. She wanted to hire him instead, and that makes him pause. Noticing the Warrior Academy emblem on her clothes, he lets out a sigh and eases up. He pulls the baton from her neck and warns that he was willing to overlook this, but this is her last chance to stay alive. As he turns to leave, Jaryong says he has no interest in dealing with a Warrior Academy student. His voice turns even colder as he warns Anisha that if she gets in his way again, he'll bury her for real. Hearing that, she goes quiet for a second. Even so, she doesn't back down. She says smugglers are worth 50 million, and hunters must be worth 400 million. Jaryong takes that as an insult and instantly flares up, furious. But then he notices something in her hand, and his whole reaction changes. Anisha is holding the Blood of Enkil necklace. She says getting one would normally take catching 5 smugglers over 200 million won total. Sweating, she offers it as just the down payment and promises even more if MC helps her pass the exam. Staring at the necklace, he mutters that she isn't just a spoiled brat, she's insanely rich and totally crazy. Anisha shoots back that crazy or not doesn't matter. Holding the necklace up again, she says what matters is that this chance could change his life. Jaryong sighs again and says he figured something like this would happen. Then he apologizes, saying this is Anisha's fault, and he doesn't really need a reason to kill her. That leaves her shaken, and she asks what he means. A huge shadow suddenly blocks the light. He looks up and says he already warned her. He reminds her she only had a few seconds, and the enraged primate beast comes crashing down from above, having tracked them after the flash. The monster slams down with all 4 arms, but both of them barely get away. Suddenly, Anisha sees something flying toward her. She catches it and realizes it's the same baton Jaryong was using. He tells her not to just stand there and asks if she remembers the fire attack from earlier. She thinks back to coating the arrow in flames, and he orders her to do the same with the baton, then throw it back. Anisha panics and says she's almost out of magic. The protagonist cuts her off and tells her to figure it out. As the monster gets ready to strike again, he warns that he can't keep its attention with his bare hands much longer, so she needs to hurry. Anisha starts pouring magic into the baton. She realizes she has less than a quarter of her power left after using so much in her last attack. While Jaryong fights the Titan, she knows this little magic won't be enough to seriously hurt it. For a moment, she thinks about running while he's distracting the monster. Meanwhile, MC keeps fighting with everything he has just to stay alive. Annoyed but determined, he keeps moving and pulls the monster's focus onto himself. Then, with perfect speed and aim, the flaming baton flies back to him, and Jaryong catches it cleanly. Anisha had used up nearly everything she had to throw it. She can't believe she's risking this much for one person, thinking she must be crazy. He leaps up, spins the baton, and says he's disappointed. He tells her this is nowhere near a quarter of the power she used before, and honestly, it's pathetic. Even so, he says it should be enough. Full of confidence, he grips the baton and charges the monster. As the fight reaches its peak, Anisha remembers something Warrior Academy students hear all the time. Against a monster, an adventurer doesn't win with strength alone. What matters most is timing, and Jaryong is showing it perfectly, dodging every attack and waiting for the right opening. The real key is landing the right hit at the right time, and when the primate titan misses, it leaves itself wide open. In other words, what adventurers should value most is making every strike count. Watching the protagonist, Anisha is deeply impressed. After avoiding every blow and waiting for the perfect moment, Jaryong swings the baton into the titan's chin. An explosion erupts, and when the smoke clears, the beast's lower face is completely ruined. MC's glasses shatter from the impact, but once he sees the attack worked and the fight is over, a small smile appears on his face. Then a memory from Anisha's past comes back. As a child, she had just finished playing with her friends and was getting ready to head home. A bodyguard was waiting for her with a car to take her back. She says goodbye, and her friends happily talk about meeting again the next day. But Anisha then overhears them gossiping, saying she was lucky because she could get anything she wanted. To her, that was completely wrong. Because of who she was, there were many things she could never truly have. Her father led Jinsong Group, the 4th largest company in South Korea, famous around the world. The heir of that group married an elf from another world, and from that union came someone unforgettable. That child was Anisha, a half-elf girl with dark hair and a stubborn heart. She admired adventurers more than anyone, and looked up to them deeply. More than anything, Anisha wanted to become one herself, no matter what she had to give up. Later on, a blonde elf tells her that dream is impossible. Anisha lies on the ground, completely worn out, as he says her elven blood is weak and she's almost human. He tells the person beside him that pushing her any further is wrong, and that someone should talk her out of this. Then Shonyu says he isn't forcing her. He's only supporting her dream of becoming an adventurer. He adds that elven talent isn't required for that, and the elf agrees. Compared to an average human, he says, Anisha does have decent talent. But even so, she's only a little above average, and all her efforts still won't be rewarded. The blonde elf says he needs to make one thing clear to Sunju. His daughter isn't some ordinary human girl. She'll never quit on her own, and she's just as stubborn as her mother, who is the elf's sister. Still, he bluntly says that no matter how hard she tries, she'll never stand among the true monsters. At best, if she keeps getting back up, she might become fairly capable. Time passes, and Anisha is older now. The elf concludes that with enough effort, she might at least earn praise as an exceptional normal human. Even so, she was born with other advantages: wealth, status, and bloodline. According to him, those things will only make her hard work feel pointless. Some limits simply can't be broken. People will mock her out of jealousy, and she may end up completely alone, seen as nothing more than a spoiled rich girl. And even if Anisha becomes strong, he says she still won't endure that loneliness for long, because isolation breaks everyone. Back in the present, Jaryong has defeated the monster. After everything she just witnessed, Anisha is left speechless. When he lands, the monster's body crashes down too. One direct hit to the face had completely destroyed it. He starts walking off with the baton in hand, when something brushes his ear, making him stop. He glances over and sees Anisha staring at him like she's seen a ghost. Looking at his face, she mutters that it's impossible. Her savior is just a high school kid. Jaryong touches his face, realizes what happened, and gets instantly annoyed at himself for slipping up. He remembers Jai Hawan warning him to be careful with his glasses since they were expensive. Holding the odd glasses, Yu says they look plain and shouldn't cost much. His boss shuts that down right away. Those glasses block face scans, change your voice, and carry over 4 magic effects. Now in the present, those pricey glasses are smashed to pieces from Jai Hawan's last attack. He covers his face and mutters that this whole thing is going badly, and it's really getting on his nerves. Still trying to process it, the girl asks if he's a veteran from the Warrior Academy. Already fed up because he only wanted a simple job, the protagonist bluntly says no. Then Yu turns to her, furious, and demands the thing she promised him. To his surprise, she hands over the necklace right away without arguing. That only reminds him how loaded Jin is, so he quickly snatches the jewel before she can study it any longer. With the necklace in hand, Jaryong checks it over and confirms it's real. Then Jin asks if he needs more money. She says that even if he doesn't go to the Warrior Academy, adventurer training schools are still really expensive. Before she can offer anything, MC cuts in and says he doesn't attend any adventurer school. That shocks her even more, and he tells her she's got him all wrong. Jai Hawan explains he's never gone to any adventurer school, not even close. He goes to a normal school instead. Jing then asks who taught him to fight. He says no one. Walking closer with both hands in his pockets, he calmly adds that he taught himself. This time Jin gets annoyed. She snaps that there's no way that's true. His movement and timing are way too sharp for someone with no training, so she insists he has to be messing with her. Instead of answering politely, Jai Hawan suddenly throws something at her, and it smacks her in the face. She catches it and asks what he just threw. After checking it, Sairom realizes it's a school ID. She pulls the card free and reads it carefully. It's from Dongyan Secondary School, and the name on it is Yu Him. Jai Hawan tells her not to bother remembering it. His school is just one more ordinary school in the country. After everything she's seen today, the girl is nearly losing it, and says that's impossible. Not about to let her doubt him, Yu points his baton at her and tells her to hand over proof too, a student ID or anything like that. Once he gets it, he reads the name Jin Sairam and checks whether it's real. He also sees she's the same age as him and confirms she really is from the Warrior Academy. Then, for some reason, he slips her ID into his pocket, and Jin immediately asks why. Jai Hawan says it's simple, she made him an offer. Since she now knows who he is, he needs insurance before taking her job. He can't risk her turning on him later. He adds that he never works without backup plans, and there's still one more thing he needs to do. The protagonist pulls out his phone, wraps an arm around Jin's shoulders, and drags her into a side hug, leaving her completely flustered. Yu says he's taking a selfie with her. If she betrays him, the photo will prove she was tied to a smuggler too. As they pose, Jin is still frozen in shock, and Jai Hall suddenly realizes she may have gotten herself into something serious. With a threatening look, he tells her to smile, and that's when she understands this boy is far more dangerous than she thought. She forces out a shaky little laugh and fakes a smile for the camera, but backing out is no longer an option. It's already too late, so MC takes the photo with Jin beside the Titan's corpse. Afterward, he keeps staring at the screen to make sure the picture came out right. Once he's satisfied, he tells Jin it's time to talk payment, and asks what she actually wants done. Still rattled by him, Saxram says the job is to collect coins. Jin explains that during the 6-hour test, she has to gather coins hidden around the exam zone. To prove herself as a Warrior Academy student, she needs to find a box at a set location with a coin inside. She already got 1 coin, so she only needs 1 more to pass. Then Jin says the last box she needs is nearby, and Jaryong asks where. She tells him it's in the ruins of the old Eugene shopping mall. That answer catches him off guard, like he just figured something out. He says he gets it now, though Jin has no idea what he means, so he explains their meeting wasn't random, because the thing he came for is also in that mall. After a quick explanation of his mission, the girl blurts out that she can't believe he's after the Imperial Wasp. Jaryong corrects her right away. He's not after the wasp itself, just something it makes, maybe honey or jelly. He's not fully sure. He says the jelly gives off a strong smell that pulls monsters in, which is probably why the primate titan showed up too. Still, what matters now is whether she really has to go to the mall, or if another coin is somewhere else. Looking uneasy, Jin says the mall is the only place left with a coin. The other groups probably took all the other boxes. Hearing that, the protagonist just looks at her, and once she mentions groups, he quietly understands why she was alone. Even so, Jaryong tells Jin it's fine. In fact, that makes things easier for him. He says they'll go in, grab the coin and the jelly, then get out safely. He's about to name his price, but Jin beats him to it, and offers 950 million won. She says that's all the money she has, and the huge number instantly reminds him how rich she is. Seirom starts to say she can get more if needed, but Yun cuts her off and says that's enough. As he turns toward their destination, he adds that the price goes up if things go bad, but if all goes well, that amount works. He asks if she can still run, and she quickly nods yes. With that, they break into a sprint through the forest toward the mall. A little behind him, the young woman is already struggling. Out of breath, she watches Yoon Srinyari run ahead like it costs him no effort at all. To her, his speed is unbelievable. Meanwhile, Jaryong sighs to himself, thinking he agreed too fast and should have asked for more since she's obviously rich. While they run, Jin calls out and asks if she can ask him something. Looking bored, he says sure, and she asks if he really learned all of this on his own. He says not everything, but most of it came from training by himself. As they keep moving, Jaryong starts talking about his past, and says that when he was a kid. But before he can finish, he senses danger. Two strange creatures are hunting nearby. They're Gari raptors, beasts from what used to be Boromadon, and Jio immediately tells Jin to get ready to fight. She stops at once, draws her bow, and prepares to attack. But before Jin can move, MC bursts forward and charges the monsters himself. He never had formal adventurer training. Everything he knows came from risking his life. Still, there was one exception. When he was young, he once saw his father move in a way he never forgot. From that, he picked up 3 special techniques. Closing in with his baton, Jaryong uses one on the Guri Raptor. The first technique is called the needle. It uses all his speed and body weight to hit a vital point, and he lands it perfectly. The move is simple, but polished through experience, instinct, and raw talent. Even top adventurers haven't fully mastered it, yet Jaryong has. So the first monster drops in a single hit. The second beast is only 2-star, so Jin takes it down without much trouble, though she gets a few scratches. After putting away her bow, Seirom says something feels wrong. Gary raptors usually move in packs of at least 5. The protagonist says that means she wasn't the only one affected by the royal jelly's scent. There are probably monsters all over the area, and by now they've reached the edge of the city where the mall stands. Noticing she's not in great shape, Yu suggests a short break before they keep going. Going back to the earlier topic, Jin asks if he ever had any personal training when he was younger. Yu says no again. He only watched someone train and copied what he saw. And because he had to stay hidden from that person, he only managed to learn a few moves. Since people rarely ask him this, he wants to know why she cares so much. But instead of answering, Jin gets seriously frustrated and blurts out that after everything she really doesn't like him. Then she suddenly throws something at Yoai Jaryong, and he catches it without even knowing what it is. When he checks what she threw, MC sees it's a stamina vial, a really pricey one. He looks at Jin and asks if she's seriously giving it to him for free. Jin tells him to drink it already, since he's clearly worn out and not at full strength. Instead, he points out the mixed message. She just said she didn't like him, and now she's handing him a gift. To her shock, he starts putting the vial away. Seirom immediately asks what he thinks he's doing. Jaryong says he's not wasting it now. He can sell it later for cash, which only makes Seirom madder. She snaps back that it's expensive for a reason, so he should quit arguing and use it. But he calmly says he knows exactly what it's worth, and on the black market it would sell for a lot. Jin can only grumble to herself. He's weird, totally impossible, but right now, he's still all she's got. Then the protagonist decides they've rested enough and says they should move out. So the two head on. Seeing Jin still lost in thought, he figures rich kids really are strange. They act like money barely matters. Once they get near the mall, Jaryong says she already knows the plan, but they should review it one more time. Their job isn't to fight monsters. They're going in, taking what they need, and getting out fast. No matter what's inside, she has to follow his lead and stay calm. MC adds that she may have learned a lot, but survival is his thing, so she just needs to trust him. Even so, Jin keeps acting oddly, bothered by a strange feeling she can't explain. Back at the Warrior Academy, she used to be ignored and shut out. This is the first time she's gone into danger with someone who doesn't look down on her. As Jaryong rises, he tells her it's time to go. Jin still feels nervous, knowing real danger is right in front of them. Soon, they arrive at the old shopping mall. The moment they step inside, both of them tense up. A crushing pressure suddenly closes in around them, and Jin asks what it is. Jaryong doesn't know either. He's never felt anything like this before. Then they spot torn up monster bodies ahead, proof that something insanely strong came through here. Humans can be much braver than they think. If they have a reason, they can push through almost anything. What breaks them is when reality goes way beyond the plan. These monsters don't belong here, and even pro explorers would struggle with them. Looking at the slaughter, they can't even guess what caused it. Yong tells Jin to stay focused. Something deadly is nearby, and she already knew this trip would be dangerous. She says she's only shaken because this is worse than she imagined, but the mission itself hasn't changed. Right after that, she catches movement in the dark. A shape shifts in the shadows, and he pulls out his spear. The creature rises. It's a slasher lip, around 2 to 3 stars. The protagonist rushes it at once. The monster's mouth opens, and a huge tongue shoots at him, but he blocks it with his staff. Then he realizes something is off. The tongue has wrapped around his weapon. The beast yanks it back, and the pull drags him with it. Before it can reel him into its jaws, he lets go of the staff. From above, he regains control, then drops in with a clean kick that lands perfectly. Jin watches from a distance, waiting for the right moment to help. Yong picks up his staff again. Jin is rattled that the thing was still alive, but he says that was on purpose. He kept it alive because if anyone else is nearby, its scream will warn him first. She asks who he was trying to warn. The answer? Himself. He wasn't about to sit still and wait. Then another person shows up, saying he's had a lot to clean up and it left him tired. Jin realizes he's another explorer. MC stays tense, and she asks if they know each other. The man says the two of them look too green to be smugglers. Then he spots the crest on Jin's clothes. In an instant, he's right in front of them, asking if they're from the warrior school. Jin says yes, and he replies that whatever team they are, it's a shame, because they're going to die here. Jin is horrified, but he tells her not to listen. This isn't some normal explorer. He's a villain here to kill and steal the royal jelly. The man says he wasn't supposed to touch his client's goods without permission, but that only matters if he gets caught. And so far, luck has been on his side. He'd heard the target's partner was carrying something valuable. The plan was to ambush them on the way, but things changed. He failed to wipe them out earlier, and though he entered this place, he still hasn't found his target. He figures the man is hiding in some smuggler route. Hearing that, Yong realizes the smuggling center lost contact because of this guy, not the wasp venom. So the one in front of them caused all of it before the fight even began. The protagonist can already tell this enemy is trouble. The man even offers them a painless death if they cooperate. He's clearly on a whole different level from the weirdo they met before. MC tells Jin to grab the coins and run. He'll hold the man off for a while. After what this guy has done, there probably aren't many monsters left anyway, so she needs to move fast. But before he can finish, the enemy attacks. The strike is insanely fast, but it still misses. He immediately yells at her to run and stop hesitating. For his plan, and for the money, she has to stay alive. When the enemy sees her leave, he gets annoyed. He says splitting up is a bad choice, since staying together gave them better odds. Yong doesn't care. He steadies himself and gathers his strength. His eyes sharpen with total focus. He swings the staff with skill and raw force, and the enemy is startled when he realizes he telegraphed his move. A second later, the protagonist's foot slams straight into his face. The man is sent flying, but MC knows it's not over. The enemy admits he's impressed. He underestimated them because they were young, but now he'll use his gear. Even at that age, MC is already better than most pros, so he has to get serious. Then he tells him not to worry, it'll be over fast. This man is Yang Dagan, a gold-class adventurer. Elsewhere, someone says that wasn't bad at all, and adds that the instant noodles turned out great. He offers some to the bald man, but the offer gets turned down. Instead, he tells him to sit and wait, since the guy sleeping on the job won't wake up anytime soon. The bald man is furious. He paid a lot for that man, and now he's passed out mid-mission. Pacing around, he says he used to be an adventurer. The other man tells him not to be too harsh. The sleeper didn't lose because he was weak. He lost because this kind of fight wasn't his specialty. Adventurers don't only battle monsters. That man was probably trained to hunt and explore, not to fight another human face to face. Since he wasn't used to that, losing to a smuggler makes sense. The bald man argues that he's heard plenty of adventurers fight each other too, and that part is true. The stronger they become, the bigger the rewards, and sooner or later fights happen. Sometimes even teammates get greedy enough to betray each other. The bald man can't believe adventurers would kill one another, but there's usually no one there to stop it, and inside the dungeon there are no rules. Just say a monster killed him, and that's enough. No alibi needed. The higher an adventurer climbs, the more ready they have to be to fight people too, but this case was different. The sleeper's class just wasn't high enough, which is why he ended up flat on the ground. Picking a fight with a partner? That's almost cute. And if he got caught, then the fight must have happened outside the dungeon. It was probably a simple clash without equipment, though the bald man doesn't know what that means. Equipment is the weapons and armor an adventurer brings into a dungeon, even the small stuff. With that gear, even the sleeping guy could have done better. It matters that much. Equipment makes up half an adventurer's fighting power. Meanwhile, Jiraiya knows the enemy didn't dodge. His hit landed clean and hard, right on target, but the blade's defense is high. While the protagonist thinks that over, the enemy warns him not to lose focus. The next strike comes fast, and MC barely blocks it with his staff. Letting his mind wander in a fight like this is dangerous. It disrespects both his enemy and his own life, which could end in a second. The man takes that opening and drives a kick into Jiryong's stomach. The impact is brutal, sending him flying several meters. Before he could crash into anything, he dug his feet into the floor and stopped himself. The second he steadied himself, the weirdo was already back on him, swinging over and over with his blade. He couldn't block every hit, and a few cuts slipped through. One even sliced his cheek. Feeling in control now, the weirdo mocked him and told him to fight like before, if he really could. That wasn't possible. The shadow jacket was S-rank armor, and the weirdo had one on. It burned the user's blood to raise defense against physical attacks and boost strength too. Right now, he was fighting in berserker mode. Finding an opening would be tough, but not impossible. Still, one bad counterattack would get him killed. The fight kept going, and the weirdo was completely out of control. He suddenly slashed at stomach level, making the boy flinch, then laughed and said it was a feint. Even so, he'd lasted longer than expected. Then the boy did something strange. He asked if today was some kind of special day, and took off his own jacket. Getting back up, he said he actually liked the weirdo's jacket. Even with all that, the guy wasn't as strong as he looked. His huge aura had scared him, but if this was all he could do against an unarmed student, then he was just a weak fighter hiding behind gear. The boy added that if he had a jacket like that, things would be different. That crushed the weirdo's pride, and he started yelling that the brat would pay for talking like that. Jaryong knew he wasn't the one who had to rush. His opponent still had to win, find Seirum, and kill her. If the fight dragged on, the edge stayed with him. That would make the weirdo lose patience, and the protagonist knew it. With his mind fixed on ending this fast, the weirdo charged in a rage. The boy braced himself. Their weapons slammed together, aura bursting from both sides. He had learned this just from watching when he was little. This was the second technique. A blue aura vortex formed between them. He didn't have enough raw power, so he used the enemy's force against him to create an attack he couldn't do alone. The move, which he still hadn't mastered, was called Swell, and its power was brutal. That one strike hit like a truck. The impact exploded outward. Afterward, he had to lean on his staff. The technique had damaged his insides and taken a huge toll. He never thought he'd use that in a real fight. And to think a pro adventurer could be this simple, just charging straight ahead. He told the weirdo to give up, because his time was up. Instead, the weirdo pulled out a dagger and told him to shut his mouth. His hands shook like he was scared. Then he suddenly drove the blade into his own chest. The boy didn't see that coming. But the weirdo said one thing was certain. No matter what, he'd kill that brat. Meanwhile, on the department store's 5th floor, Seiram had reached her destination. There, she found a box. She put her hand on the blue circle, and the box verified both her ID number and who she was. Now that she'd found it, all she had to do was go back. Then she felt the air change. She turned to check behind her. Seiram remembered Jaryong telling her to run, to stay safe, because that was how they'd get the money. But now she thought running away wouldn't change anything. It took everything she had to keep believing those words. All she could picture was the weirdo's face. He wouldn't have picked that fight without some way out, right? As she weighed her choices, she remembered how much he loved bullying people at school. It was one of the things he enjoyed most. He really was a genius. Since he was young, he'd believed life would always be easy for him, because his talent was obvious. Adults praising him just came with that. So did ruling over kids his age. But there was one thing that hadn't gone his way. He'd been rejected by the warrior school. To make himself feel better, he decided it had to be politics, money beating talent. That was the only answer he would accept, because if the choice had been based only on skill, there was no way they would have turned him down. In the endurance test, he'd ranked first. Compared to normal kids, he wasn't just gifted, he was far above them. Once again, he placed near the top, and nobody in class was even surprised. Still, he enjoyed being the one everyone talked about. Now they were at the final task before graduation. After the ceremony, someone came up to him. It was the headmaster, who congratulated him and said he'd make a fine adventurer. Then came a warning: don't get arrogant and never stop moving forward. He only looked down on the man, thinking he was a washed-up loser stuck in a dull job. He swore he'd rise so high that people like the headmaster could only dream of it. But now he was on the dungeon floor, shaking in fear. The adventurer who saved him said he'd rushed over because the situation felt dangerous, but he hadn't expected the monster to be this weak. Yet that same weak monster had wiped out his whole team. Reality was nothing like he imagined. The adventurer gave him a look he knew well, the same look he'd always given other people. That's when he understood. The old man's words hadn't been advice. They were comfort for what his future would really be. He wasn't one of the special few. He was only better than average. The ordinary people admired him, but he was only a little above them. That jacket had been made from a living vampire, and he was now forcing all his blood into his heart. That was the price to kill the boy. The boy asked if he was really sure because that trick looked like it would wreck him later, but the weirdo charged anyway. The collision hit hard. Even after changing, he hadn't gotten much faster. The real change was how terrifying he looked. His attacks were heavy and wild, and then to the boy's shock, his arms started stretching. After everything else that had happened today, this was somehow another surprise. Blood dripped to the floor. The weirdo stared at his target, now breathing hard and stuck in a worn-down guard. Even so, he somehow blocked it. The weirdo praised his fast reactions and talent, then asked why someone like him had become a smuggler. The boy didn't get the question. He opened his mouth and asked what was with the sudden praise. Whatever he did with his life was none of the weirdo's business. Even so, the weirdo thanked him. Thanks to the boy, he'd finally get to crush someone truly talented. Thrilled, he moved to make that dream real. But the boy wasn't about to make it easy. Even after all that damage, his body still moved fine. Seeing that only made the weirdo more excited, and he urged him to show even more talent. The boy knew this ugly form couldn't last long. If blood was the fuel, then of course there had to be a limit, so he could push him into burning even more blood and force him to use the needle. But the weirdo had already thought of that. In his mind, it was too late for the boy. He swung again, then a fiery blast hit his shoulder out of nowhere. The boy turned to see what happened. His friend had come back to help. He smiled at her, clearly not expecting that. Seriously, she never listens to him. Still, sometimes that side of her is kind of moving. With the weirdo in range, he smashed him again with the staff. Soon the area was covered in debris, and a thin haze hung in the air. The weirdo's body lay on the ground, though they still couldn't tell if he was really dead. The boy didn't think that was enough to finish him, and told her not to worry about it. Holding up a picture of him, he said the guy probably wouldn't try revenge. Doing that could ruin his whole career. For now, that should be enough. Picking up his staff, he asked if she'd already forgotten. He saved her life, so she owed him one. That made 2 times now, once at the start, and again when she chose to follow him. But since he's so generous, he'll count it as just 1. Annoyed, she asked if saying sorry would really hurt that much. In the parking lot, everything was wrecked. A golden light was shining up through a hole in the ground, and it had to be something worth checking out. So they headed down the stairs toward it. As they got closer, a sweet smell filled the air. Near the bottom, they saw a body on the floor with a briefcase in its lap, and the golden glow was coming from it. He walked up carefully, then shut his eyes for a moment like he was paying respect. Then he looked at her and reminded her he'd already warned her about the kind of things she'd see, but she'd followed him anyway. Since they were here already, they decided to open the briefcase. He set his hands on it and started lifting it open. The smell was almost impossible to explain. It was sweet and strangely tempting, like it wanted anyone who smelled it to stop thinking. Left out in the open like this, it was probably drawing monsters in. Looking at the item beside it, he wondered if the bag also held royal jelly. His instincts told him they needed to leave fast, because staying too long could bring trouble. They hurried back to the first floor, but the murderer's body was gone. If he was still alive, he'd escaped. Then a scream rang out. He shouted for them to wait, and said he remembered every one of their faces. From now on, he'd do everything he could to ruin them and make them regret what they did that day. Burning with hate, the weirdo ran off, only to learn life had one more surprise waiting. A starving monster was already in front of him, leaping with its jaws wide open. This wasn't the ending he expected. He had no time to react and got eaten by the monster instead. His revenge would have to wait for another life. Not even the kids who spared him thought karma would hit that fast. Figuring it was time to go, they headed out the back. After walking a bit, he guessed they were finally safe. Then he asked about her test, learned she still had time, and held out his hand to say goodbye. He told her he was glad they met. Their time together had served its purpose, and she gave him a real, honest smile. They shook hands, both satisfied with what they'd done. As they parted, he reminded her to keep everything secret, send the payment, and be careful if she didn't want to run into him again. But before leaving, she asked if they could meet again someday. Cabalon noticed some trash on the ground, then looked over with interest. The boy had come back, and his ripped clothes made it clear he'd been through a lot. Now they decided to check the briefcase too. That familiar golden glow spilled out again. If this ever became public, it would be worth enough to buy a few buildings. He praised the boy for the job, and said the payment would be sent soon. Then he took another look at him, while putting out his cigarette. Yu Yang looked off, so Cabalon Ho asked what was wrong. Was he bothered by the adventurer who died fighting him? But that man died afterward, and it wasn't something he should feel guilty about, so Cabalon Ho asked if anything else happened down there. The boy brushed it off, saying it was nothing, and telling him to stop asking. Then he looked at the briefcase and asked if he could keep what was left, since it didn't seem to be royal jelly. Cabalon Ho agreed. Anything outside the target item belonged to the smuggler. That was the rule. He just wanted to know which kid was supposed to eat it. It could bring someone back from the brink of death, but that wasn't its only use. It could also raise a person's limit and bring out more of their natural talent. The details were still unclear, but it only worked on people who weren't adults yet, so they wouldn't waste it on someone older. It was probably meant for a student from the warrior school. Yeyu Jeryong said he was heading out, and Cabalon Ho wished him luck. He also asked him to greet her father, if he got the chance. The boy said he would. Lately, things hadn't been going great. Outside, he stared at the evening sky and thought about the warrior school, and what the girl had told him. He asked her straight up if she was interested in him, but she said she was serious. The entrance exam was in winter. Only a handful got accepted, but she told him he had a real shot and should go for it. No adventurer can clear a dungeon alone, no matter how strong they are. The things inside dungeons are too much for one person to handle by themselves. That's why teams matter. People with different skills work together, cover each other's weak spots, and grow stronger. That's how dungeons get explored. He asked if the school's political groups just fought each other. She told him if it were that simple, nobody would be worried. Their class had 2 factions, and each was led by one of the top 3 students. He asked if she belonged to either one, and she said no. The teachers don't step in, because students are expected to find their own team. She knew what he meant, that this was happening because she wasn't strong enough. She also knew she'd never be a top student. Still, she should have been able to join some team, even one tied to a faction, but one faction leader clearly disliked her. She never said it out loud, yet she kept pushing her away from everyone else. Garyon asked if she'd stolen that girl's boyfriend, but that wasn't it. Either way, she'd managed alone so far, but she wouldn't survive the coming years like that. That's why she wanted to hire Garyon. With his skill, or really just with him, she thought she might survive. As she thought it over, she glanced at the medicine on the counter. She really was a strange girl. She let out a tired sigh after such a rough day. At last she reached the place she'd been heading to and announced herself. It was the 12th dungeon barrier in Gangnam. While waiting, she thought about the boy she met. Before they parted, he said he'd heard her out and wished her luck. She figured he probably wouldn't bring it up again. Then someone told her she wasn't late. It was Kung, the instructor in charge of hand-to-hand combat training. She asked if something had happened since she still had time. He said there'd been a problem. Monsters not usually found in that area had shown up. No one had died, but some students said the test couldn't be finished and asked for help. Those students had been in the same area where she found the coin. He looked at her and asked if she had trouble too. Nervously, she said no. He accepted that without comment, then told her to stay behind him. Right away she felt a terrifying presence. When she looked, her fear got even worse. It was another monster like the one that ate the weirdo, only much bigger. A titan ape showing up there was highly unusual, since they don't live anywhere close. Maybe something had drawn it in, and she quickly guessed what it was. The same scent she noticed before. The instructor told Saryum again to stay behind him, and she apologized. That monster wanted nothing but to devour them. Every instructor at this school used to be an adventurer. Some quit because old injuries finally caught up with them. That's how outsiders think of them. But one punch from that instructor was enough to crush the titan. The blow forced it down, and flames raced up his arm. The moment the fire reached its head, the monster was blown apart. Its body dropped to the ground. Back in their prime, these instructors had been rankers. Even after it died, the monster's head kept bursting apart. His prosthetic was ruined, and he told the girl she was lucky he came. Otherwise, this could have ended very badly. Even then, he placed a hand on her shoulder. The important thing was that she was safe. Now it was time to head somewhere secure. People forget the instructors there are warriors too. Back at school, they talked about the students who called for rescue. Those students would get to retake the test, which was lucky for them. He called them weaklings, and while they were talking, said one of them had just arrived. The one-armed man looked at her and told her to go inside and wait. He said he'd make sure everyone was accounted for, and she should check the count and change into her uniform. She definitely felt safer now. A girl told her she knew she'd be fine. At least her method was fast. That fake concern came from Anisha, who claimed she'd been really worried about her classmate. She answered that she never expected Anisha to worry about her. Keeping up the act, Anisha said it wasn't her speaking, it was her sister. It all began 6 years earlier. Zeke, Syrum's uncle, told her she needed to increase her output. She had to pay attention and stay focused, but that took more effort than she could manage. He ended the training and said that was enough, adding that she had improved since last time, just not by much. Then she heard cheering nearby. Worn out, she turned to look. It was her sister, showing far more talent. Anisha had mastered the technique easily. She didn't even look like a hybrid, and her magic control was better than that of many purebloods. He called her cousin a genius, and warned that if she kept going down this path, she'd always live in Anisha's shadow, and the constant comparisons would be the least of her problems. He also told her to be careful, because the girl seemed cruel. Still acting innocent, Anisha said she didn't get it. Why did nobody want to be on the same team as her? Before she could answer, Anisha cut in and said if she really wanted to know, she should just team up with her, but that wouldn't work. They both filled the same role, healing magical damage from a distance. Having two people do the same job made no sense. That was a problem for others, not her. Still, she said there was no reason to worry, because there would probably be another test. So she answered that she didn't care about the test. She had already passed. Anisha said she was impressed and that her sister must have worked hard, but warned her not to push too much. After all, she was the one who had to inherit it anyway. That short exchange left her furious. What Anisha really wanted was for her to give up. Later that night, the door suddenly opened. Yogaryong rushed in, clearly shaken. The patient's guardian had arrived, and he immediately asked if something had happened. Sadly, his father had gotten worse again. The doctors couldn't fully explain it. His condition was incredibly rare, maybe unique in the whole world. There was no medical record of anyone else surviving dragon blood poisoning. Yogaryong already knew the truth. All they could do was ease his father's pain. They couldn't cure him, but even that had become a problem. The ingredients for the pain medicine were running short. At this stage, the only thing that could help was milk from an extremely dangerous monster, the flying tiger, a 5-star threat. He said he had money, but the doctor made it clear the issue wasn't money. A new potion had become popular with adventurers, one that boosted strength for a long time even in small amounts, and one of its key ingredients was that monster's milk. It used to be something you could buy if you had cash, since people thought it was mostly useless, but now companies and adventurers were buying huge amounts of it. Jaryong gets angry. They don't even have a little of the medicine for someone who's dying. But the doctor says that's not the real problem. The issue is the dose. What his father needs equals enough material to make 10 of those strength potions. If more patients needed it, maybe the government would step in. But since his father is the only known case, that won't happen. They promise to do what they can, but without that ingredient, there's almost nothing left to try. After hearing that, MC sits on a bench, lost in thought. His life just keeps getting harder, and he pulls out his phone to make a call. He calls the girl he met earlier. Xiaobei asks if it's too late, but she tells him it's fine. He gets straight to it. He doesn't have many choices left, so he's ready to accept her offer. She hears him out, then asks if he has any conditions. After listening, she says she'll check on it, and that it might actually work. He can hardly believe it, but she confirms she can help. Her company makes that potion, and since he only needs a small amount, getting it done is possible. He never expected that answer, but he's relieved, so they make a verbal deal. She also reminds him to get ready for the entrance exam. After all, there's no downside to preparing early. The next day, Xiaobei heads to the company headquarters. She points out that he came earlier than expected. When he walks up, she asks how he's feeling, and he says he's okay. The protagonist asks what they're doing here, and she tells him they're going to test his potential. She explains that the world has changed a lot. In the past, a normal human could usually only reach D rank. Getting to C meant you were basically a genius. Anything above B goes beyond normal human limits. Even without counting magic, explorers need at least C rank in 5 categories. To enter warrior school, you need B rank in at least 3. Xiaobei asks if this is just some kind of physical test. She says that's how they test kids, but after puberty, it gets more complicated. He asks what makes it different, and once he's put into a strange suit, he starts to understand. Now he sees why the process is harder. Really, he should have realized it when she first asked how he felt. Then he sees what he's up against, a battle robot. Since he's already here, Xiaobei decides to give it everything he's got. He wants to know what his real limit is, so he gets ready to fight the robot. Blue light starts shining from the dummy, and smoke rises as it powers up. The girl watches, impressed. Another woman beside her says he's gutsy. Most people freeze when they see the golem. This woman is Jung, a golem expert, and she's curious about the boy trying to transfer. Sairam gives a quiet smile because she knows that's not the whole story. After setting down her coffee cup, she gets ready for the aptitude test to begin. The golem shifts into motion and prepares to attack. Xiaoyang doesn't look scared at all. Sairam explains this test is usually done around the 6th or 7th year, and the suit helps collect exact data. That way they can push the body to its limits in several areas. Even then, it's hard to tell if someone is truly gifted or just someone who's trained for a long time. She already knows Zhao Beiyang is physically strong, so pushing him all the way won't be easy. Still, he should be getting tired by now. When the other woman calls out to Sairam, she wants to know if this is really the same boy who failed a special school entrance exam. She's honestly curious. With talent like this, he must have failed at something serious. Even at lower settings, that model is normally used to train pros. After dodging a few times, MC reads the pattern and finds a chance to strike. His skill is absurd. Based on instinct alone, he's already above the average pro. Saruman asks for the measurement results. The answer isn't simple. Hungyi still hasn't reached his limit. They need to raise the difficulty, but moving it up by 1 or 2 levels won't be enough. It has to go all the way to max power, and Zhang asks if Sairam understands the risk. Doing that to someone unregistered is illegal, but without it, they can't find his real ceiling. Sairam starts thinking of some other option. Then, as she steps in, someone complains that this isn't what he's paid for. She turns, startled to see who came in. It's Director Zeke. He says no one uses the lab without reporting the reason. First, Sairam sees her uncle, and is surprised. She didn't expect him there on a Sunday. He says there'd better be a reason she's willing to risk getting arrested over. Sairam tells him it's all on her. She was the one who asked for this. Zeke presses her, asking if that's really true or if she's just covering for an employee. He reminds her this place belongs to her father, not to her, so she can't just claim responsibility whenever she wants. The rumors about the director are true. He's her mother's brother, and he's always treated her coldly, even though she's done nothing wrong. Since it's the weekend, other adventurers tied to the company are using the place too. He keeps lecturing until Jaryong speaks through the intercom. He asks if something's wrong up there. Zeke asks who that is, and whether he's worth this trouble. An employee says he's Sairam's friend. She explains that he failed his entrance exams and lost his potential registration, so he came here for help. Because the process is expensive, she only wanted to help a friend who couldn't pay. Zeke looks at the battered golem and thinks for a moment. Then he says he'll handle it himself. The employee asks what exactly he means. Zeke says the golem wasn't enough, and safe mode can't be turned off, so he'll go down there and test this friend himself. Jaryong still isn't sure what's happening. Still, it's not unusual for adventurers to clash when someone's trying to measure another person's limits. In this case though, the one facing him is on a completely different level. Zeke says he'll skip the introductions because he doesn't have time to waste. Right away he realizes this guy is definitely not normal. He has no idea who he's about to fight, but every instinct in his body screams danger. Zeke tells him to come at him. The strange man from earlier had been his first fight, but this is different. No matter how he looks at it, this doesn't feel like an opponent he can beat. Even so, once he's told to attack, he starts to move. He doesn't need to worry about Zeke getting hurt, so Jaryong begins working out his plan. He draws in his aura and finally charges. Zeke doesn't move at all, he just waits. Looks can fool you. Zeke is the 7th strongest ranker in Korea, a white class adventurer. The protagonist can't find even one opening, but he refuses to quit. If there isn't an opening, he'll make one. His plan is simple. The second Zeke dodges, he'll follow with one strike from behind. He wants to use that dodge itself to create the chance, but Zeke catches the staff with one hand. That was not the outcome Jae-young wanted. Zeke is way stronger than he imagined, and even Zeke notes that the kid is more reckless than expected. Then, with MC right in front of him, Zeke drops him with a single kick. The hit is brutal. He goes flying into the wall. Still, one thing doesn't make sense to Zeke. Did Jae-young attack like that because he knew it was a test? Or did he really think it could work? Either way, Zeke thinks it was a foolish move. He kicks the staff back to the protagonist with his foot. The boy is still conscious, but he'd lost his only weapon for a moment. That alone puts MC on even higher alert. Then Zeke lets him have the staff back. Up to now, he's been going easy on the boy's bad decisions. But one more mistake, and Zeke says he'll make sure Jae-young regrets ever becoming an adventurer. He sets his feet and takes an attacking stance. He doesn't know why, but he can feel some personal hostility from Zeke. Still, he doesn't let it get to him. He rushes in again to attack. Zeke expects the same pattern as before, because the approach looks similar, but Jae-young suddenly plants one foot hard, and that instantly makes Zeke focus. Two attacks are coming at once. That long-range strike was meant to catch him off guard, but even that isn't enough. The protagonist figures this guy still isn't satisfied, which is fine, because he's only getting started. Now his staff shines bright blue as he prepares a stronger attack. Even Zeke still doesn't know what he'll do next. Another string of attacks comes rushing in. Letting out some aura, Zeke admits it's not bad. He tightens his fists and blocks every attack that comes at him. From above, the employee watches in shock. It looks less like a test, and more like a fight between two pros, judging by the skill on display. It's hard to believe this boy still hasn't gotten into any school. Still, he isn't good at everything. Shamrais what she means, and the employee says he has one big weakness holding him back. In that area, she adds, Samram is much better than he is, which makes Samram wonder what that weakness could be. From where she's standing, Shamrong looks like he's keeping up with Zeke. Now she really wants to know what's wrong with him. MC barely slips past a blow, and that punch almost lands right on his exposed face. The employee starts watching with real concern. Now Jae-young has lost his edge and is getting hit again and again. He's in terrible pain and can't react fast enough to defend himself, but he still forces himself to fight back. With one swing of the staff, he finally drives Zeke away. Zeke notes that he managed to keep control of his staff at the last second. And that's true, because right after that, Zeke's fist slams into his stomach. The protagonist is thrown into the wall again. The director is incredible, and Seirom can tell he's still holding back. She watches closely as Zeke tells Jae-young not to get hung up on losing. It was going to happen anyway. What bothers him is how pitiful MC's path to that loss looks. He doesn't even have the basics. The employee agrees with that. His talent and reflexes are amazing, but his foundation is missing. It's like he's never trained a day in his life. Shagain is let down. If Jae-young had learned the basics early on, his talent could have gone much farther. Seirom recalls he once said no one ever taught him. Zeke says he's met plenty of people like that. A lot of gifted people never polish what they have, but Seirom knows the protagonist isn't one of them. Zeke gives him that much, then tells him to quit. If someone this weak trusts talent alone, he'll end up dead. MC gets back up and snaps that Zeke has it all wrong. He's been talking like MC is some lazy fool and it's getting on his nerves. That catches Zeke off guard. His last hit was supposed to finish it. Jae-young says he doesn't care how it ends. He wants one more round, and this time, he'll show the result of his hard work. The employee asks what is wrong with these two. She finds it funny they still want to fight when they already have enough data to judge his potential. Even Seirom steps in, saying there is no need to keep going. He can stop here and look at the results. Zeke says whatever he is planning, it won't change anything. He even assumes the boy is just looking for praise from him, but that's not what he's after. Jae-young is just furious, and right now he wants to punch that smug elf in the face. No one taught him anything, so he had to figure it all out by himself. Still, it wasn't hopeless. He was born with talent. That let him cover parts the basics should have taught him. On top of that, he has tons of real battle experience, so he learned to move however he needed. He improved fast, but he never thought he was above everyone else. If anything, he was usually let down by so-called prodigies who turned out weaker than him. But Zeke is different. Jae-young wants to smash that elf, yet he knows he's facing a monster far beyond him. Then he notices the aura pouring off Zeke. Now the elf is taking him seriously. The moment he faced someone he saw as a true wall, his blood started to boil. Watching them, the employee calls this insane, and wonders why the director is getting pulled into it too. Sarmiel spots the change right away. His base is different now, and his stance puts more weight forward. These two aren't fighting like before anymore. Jae-young lets out a calm breath, sets himself and attacks again. This time will be different. His opening strike comes in hard. Zeke avoids it, but the edge still nicks his cheek. Even the employee can't believe what she's seeing. Jae-young's whole approach has changed. Even so, Zeke keeps slipping past every attack. They're still rough and basic compared to before, but the openings are gone. Whoever taught him that or whatever he learned from is incredible. Right now, the protagonist only wants to beat this elf. He thinks back to the person he watched as a kid. He copied everything that man did as best he could. Zeke gets tired of dodging, grabs the staff with one hand and launches a counter. MC barely manages to block. When he was little, Juryeong used to copy him with pure excitement. Now he's up against the strongest enemy he's ever met, and Zeke clearly wants to crush him too. That man had found the little boy's effort interesting. This time Zeke lands a blow. Back then that man had looked at the tiny kid with real interest. Zeke swings again, but Juryeong barely slips past it. He whips his staff around for a counter, fully trusting his skill. Long ago that man had simply patted his head and looked at him with admiration. That strike would have been nasty if it landed, so Zeke has to jump. The instant he touches down, there should be an opening. Zeke knows that if he attacks then, he won't be able to dodge. Still, he's ready to give the boy what he's been chasing this whole fight. Since dodging isn't an option, Zeke charges straight at him. The others can only stare, stunned by what they're seeing. Smoke spreads through the arena. That was the last exchange. If Juryeong hadn't used that strange staff technique, Zeke would have won for sure if the fight had gone on. Zeke asks if that was the protagonist's pride talking. MC smiles and says no, that's just all he knew. Everything he had managed to memorize. In the end, he only got beaten even worse. Still, Zeke says it wasn't bad at all. Zeke isn't very popular with the people around him because he's a pain to deal with, but no one can really question his judgment. His ability is the real deal. He holds a hand over Juryeong's face and starts using his power. The aura slowly rises. When his niece worries, Zeke tells her not to. The boy will be fine. He's already healed him. He just wants to know if the boy's name is Yu. Zeke is one of the top 10 rankers in the country, and even he didn't expect to run into something like this today. Who would have guessed he'd meet that man's son here? After all, Zeke is Korea's best healer. The sun finally begins to set. Someone grumbles that if Zeke was going to be late, he could have at least sent a message. They could have had coffee and relaxed, but now they'll be late to the briefing again, and whenever that happens, everyone blames him. Zeke just says something came up and took longer than he thought. The young man says he heard Zeke was dueling some kid, but with this much delay, it sounds like it turned into several rounds. Then he gets a closer look and freezes. A small mark is on Zeke's cheek. The more he stares, the more shocked he gets, which makes Zeke curious. He asks if the mark is really a cut. Zeke, already annoyed, asks what else it would be. The young man still can't believe it. Then that boy must be ready for school. Maybe 16. Zeke corrects him. He's 17. Looks like he'll try for the warrior school during winter admissions. That route is real, but no one has passed it in the last 3 years. Still, he definitely has a shot. Cutting Zeke's cheek isn't easy. This new generation is getting scarier and scarier. Zeke says comparing anyone to elves is unfair, and he's sure the boy isn't on the same level as the young man either. Kang disagrees. He's rank 19, a black class explorer, and the leader of the Nyx attack squad. He believes he still has the edge over Juryeong in talent and experience. He's only 21 and finished school a year and a half ago. Zeke just lets out a sigh after hearing that. He mentions he hadn't seen that car before, and the young man says he usually doesn't spend much, so he treated himself this time. The protagonist is still lying on a stretcher. After a while, he finally sits up. He checks his hands and realizes every wound is gone. More than that, he doesn't feel any pain at all. The girl says he's finally awake. She asks what he was thinking. Did he really believe he could win? Juryeong says that wasn't the point. He was just really mad, and the other guy started it. But even she doesn't get why her uncle wanted to fight him. MC then asks if they're actually related. They are. He's her uncle from her mother's side. When he goes quiet, she gets curious. Juryeong says it's nothing, then adds that they seem close, judging by how Zeke treats her. She doesn't see how he came to that conclusion, but he says it's obvious to him. He says he could feel the concern of an uncle worried some stranger might be messing with his niece. She disagrees, saying Zeke isn't really warm like that. If anything, he's very strict. The staff member comes in and notices he's awake already. She asks if anything hurts, and the protagonist says his body feels fine. She says that makes sense. Zeke's healing would even fix old injuries. It may not look like it, but the director is the best healer in the country. That surprises Juryeong. Despite being so strong, fighting isn't even his main job. MC smiles at that. Either way, she's glad he's okay, and she already has the results. Sankaram says they're actually amazing. A in stamina and agility, B in strength and endurance, and C in intelligence. Looking over the data, Juryeong asks if that's really so impressive. Sankaram snaps at him to shut up, and the staff member wonders if he's actually ready for school. To become a high-level explorer, you need at least a few B-rank stats, but they also have to be balanced. Being fast means nothing if your stamina is bad, and huge strength is pointless if you can't move well. She explains that most people only have C-rank ability, but having more than one strong stat changes everything. Having C or higher in strength, stamina, and agility happens to only one person in 10,000. If those stats go even higher, it's closer to 1.5 million, and that alone puts him near the top. Juryeong doesn't just have a B in strength, he has A in the other two. He's not only balanced, he's far above average. Even as a first year, he'd be on the same level as that monster. Then she asks if he wants to hear something interesting. The person he just fought doesn't have a single stat above A. Stats only show total potential. They don't equal real combat ability. Training is what creates the real gap, and that's still not the whole story. There are things no test can measure, like fighting spirit and real field experience. It might sound harsh, but she's seen plenty of explorers make up for their weak spots through pure grit. Sairam blushes, knowing that comment was aimed at her. After hearing all that, Juri Yong thanks her. He's not upset or disappointed, he just doesn't fully get it yet. Because compared to someone he knows, he's still way behind. The staff member is surprised he knows someone like that. That's rare. Whoever it is must be famous, and he admits that's kind of true. Sairam says they're done for today, and can meet again next week. But since they're already here, the staff member suggests they stop by the medicine production department. Still, the girl hesitates, worried her uncle might be upset. But the staff member says the director already approved it. Sairam can't believe it, and asks if he really said that before leaving. Apparently his order was simple. Once the boy woke up, bring him to the equipment workshop. He also said everyone should treat the boy as his guest, even if it means making him a custom weapon no matter the cost. Sairam is stunned. Top-tier gear is every adventurer's dream, even for someone insanely gifted. If your gear is bad, it can't match your strength, and as an explorer gets stronger, they need equipment that can keep up. Hearing all this, he still doesn't get what's going on. He wonders why he'd need gear already when he's just going to school, but Sairam says he's got the wrong idea. He thinks the school gives students their equipment. That leaves them speechless, and Sairam knows that misunderstanding is on her. At a normal school, he'd be right. Each one has its own rules for what gear students can use. Yu Jerryong figures the warrior school must provide it since they have the most resources. Jung explains it's not about money. Getting good equipment is a skill too. That's why students have to bring their own gear. He says that only helps people with money, and asks if being rich counts as a skill. He's not exactly wrong, but even broke students can still get great equipment. Just getting into this school means a student has the talent to become a top explorer, maybe even a star. And that kind of potential attracts investors. Companies quickly take interest in students because they see business in backing them. The offers are huge, since these are major corporations. She says she got a scholarship from the Ginsong Group, and even a guaranteed job until retirement. Without looking surprised, he listens as she adds that this is the kind of chance the school opens up. He'll have plenty of chances to prove himself against the other students. But first, he has to pass the exam. The transfer test is even harder than the entrance one, so he needs to prepare, and getting equipment is part of that. That's why the director wanted to help. Since she already passed along the message, all he has to do is head to the refinery in the basement. She wishes him luck, and hopes he gets in. He says things could have gone badly, and Sairam asks how. His answer, he never expected her uncle to help this much. The more he hears about the test, the more it sounds like people will do anything to pass. That's exactly why she wants to help, even if she has to use her own money. That look on his face annoys her every single time. Even so, he's glad to hear it, because money alone isn't enough. The person making the gear matters too. And this company's equipment division is one of the best in the world. When they reach the forge, he says one piece of gear shouldn't be that different from another, but what he sees changes his mind. The forge is massive, built inside a former dungeon called the Bubbling Abyss. Sairam asks what he thinks. He realizes this isn't the kind of place where you casually ask for something to be made, and a chill runs through him. Then a giant figure appears behind them. The boy spins around at once, ready to fight. The figure grumbles that Zeke dragged him out of his weekend nap, and didn't even bother coming to the forge himself. Tyrion asks if it's a monster, but Sairam says no, he's the head of the equipment division. Though Tyrion isn't fully wrong. He's an ancient titan named Argeus, basically a monster by human standards, but he was naturalized in Korea through a special rite. As he lights a cigar, Argeus asks which human Zeke was talking about. Is it this little boy, or the elf's niece? She says the information was already sent to him, but Argeus brushes that off. Digital records are a human thing and he doesn't care for them. His staff handles that, but it's a day off, so no one's around. Still, that doesn't matter. Since Zeke asked him to handle this himself, he says they should begin. He points to the boy's weapon and asks if that staff is his main one. Girion says yes. Argeus immediately tells him to try hunting him. Sarim tenses up and asks what he's doing. Argeus says this is how his kind judges people. If the boy can't prove himself, he won't bother with the job. Still, he admits the boy feels different. Sharp eyes, used to hunting, with killing intent that can be honed. Then he tells him again, try to beat him. Sarim stays on edge as Girion gets ready. She warns Argeus that he rarely refuses a challenge like this. At once the Titan's eye widens. The boy has already moved in. He swings the staff with real skill and power, while Sarim watches nervously. The impact knocks Argeus's cigar to the ground, and even he finds that unbelievable. Unhurt, he demands to know where the boy got that weapon. That throws Girion off. He knows the hit landed clean. Sure, there are monsters he can't beat in one strike, but hitting this thing felt like smashing into a huge wall. Not just tough, more like striking something lifeless. Now he wants to know what kind of monster he just attacked, and there's another reason Sarim is so shaken. Monsters are ranked by stars. 1-star monsters are already dangerous enough to kill humans, but a normal armed person can still take one down. At 2 stars, the danger jumps. A trained person with guns can handle them. 3 stars are much worse. Those need armed forces with heavy weapons. At 4 stars, it becomes a disaster. Ground troops stop fighting and focus on evacuation and damage control. After that, artillery and bombs are used to wipe them out. That's the military's limit. Anything above 5 stars is beyond modern armies. Even if they win, the cost is massive destruction, so elite explorer teams are sent instead. Argius is a 7-star monster, and he asks again, where did the boy get that weapon? Girion asks if it hurt him more than expected, and doesn't get why Argius keeps pressing him. Argius tells him to think very carefully before he answers, because he's the one who made that staff. Girion is shocked. Now irritated, Argius says he'll ask one last time, why is this weapon in Girion's hands instead of the person it was forged for? If Argius made it, then the staff is above A rank, and it should be registered with the association, including the owner's identity and exact location. This isn't the kind of item a smuggler just gets hold of. Sarim refuses to believe he might have stolen it, but Girion says he won't explain and doesn't owe them an answer. Sarim calls that stupid, and Argius says he understands. Now he'll judge the boy with that in mind. The moment that happens, Girion thinks only of death. There's no way to dodge, no clear way to block, and no weakness in the monster's hand. Taking the hit means dying, so there's only one option left, the last technique he learned by watching his father. Argius notices something change, but still brings his attack down. When two forces crash head-on, the bigger one wins. But things change if they don't meet directly. With the exact angle and timing, even if victory is impossible, the force can still be redirected. Sarim can't believe he dodged an attack from a 7-star monster. Argius waits to see what comes next. Girion knows his only chance is to stab the giant's single eye with the needle, but before he can reach it, the Titan's prosthetic hand grabs him. It pulls him right up to its face. She steps in saying the boy may look suspicious, but that still doesn't give Argius the right to attack a human, and he should remember the consequences. Naturalized species can't attack humans unless it's truly an emergency. If they do, they lose their rights and are treated like hostile monsters. Argius lets the boy go and tells her not to worry. He knows that rule very well. In fact, he's finally figured out why the boy has the weapon he made. That's why Zeke woke him from his nap. He apologizes and says the boy has every right to carry that staff, and he'll make up for his mistake. Then his eye catches something else. It's been 30 years since anyone injured him. Serum doesn't understand what he means, because she missed what happened. Argius asks if they know why he works for humans now. She thinks it's because the attack squad hunted him 30 years ago, but he says that's wrong. He's almost amused that humans tell it that way, since they couldn't even touch him. The one who hunted him was a single man. That man cut off his hand and could have killed him, but chose not to. As he says that, the boy stares at him and Argius stares right back. Argius has always been a monster of overwhelming power. Back then, he was fully ready to fight that hunter. The man carried a battle axe. He was the boy's father. Ancient titans are the strongest of all giants, with unknown lifespans, and fewer than 10 are known to exist. Their strength is far beyond normal people. They're also famous for making gear with special powers, even artifacts. That's a talent they're born with, and dwarves are the closest race to them. Unlike the titans, the dwarves chose to live alongside humans. The titans didn't. They looked down on humans as beings beneath them. Then something happened, 30 years ago, during the mission to take down Argius. At the forge entrance stood an automaton colossus, a 4-star monster. They ask if the link to base is still dead. All magic communication was blocked. Something was jamming the signal. Then, in a panic, someone yelled that he was coming and told everyone to brace. The colossus attacked the intruders without holding back. The shield user planted himself and tried to stop the hit with everything he had. At the same time, the girl moved in behind the automaton to strike. She had to use this chance before it disappeared. Her attack was sharp and well aimed, but the helmet knocked it away. That was the last outcome she wanted. Her sword did nothing. It couldn't break through the armor at all. Seeing that, the automaton moved to counterattack. Its shield slammed into her. She was sent flying and crashed into the wall. The situation was way worse than they expected. Yubik's attack squad was supposed to be one of the best at clearing dungeons, but in the bubbling abyss, they were getting destroyed. They'd already run into 7 colossi, and every time one fell, another showed up right after. If the other team was doing just as badly, then everything was over. Realizing that, the shield bearer told the others to run. He already knew getting everyone out alive would be nearly impossible. While he spoke, the automaton swung again, but the young man snapped up his shield in time and blocked it. His skill lets him burn energy to boost all his physical abilities, though it leaves him helpless afterward. After catching the sword on his shield, he used another skill, push. That threw the automaton off balance. He knew if his leader had to use that power now, things would get really bad. Still, he'd already accepted they might not all survive. They couldn't beat this monster, but maybe they could stall it. If luck was somehow on their side, they might still have a chance. Then they sensed a crushing presence. Argius asked what was going on in his forge. Right then they knew they were finished. He looked at them like pests and wondered if any cockroaches were still alive after facing his automatons. Just standing near him filled them with fear. Their leader shouted one last time for everyone to run. With the little strength he had left, he rushed Argius himself. He only wanted to buy them a few more seconds, but the Titan erased him with one strike, burning him to ash. He never had a chance. To Argius, they were all beneath him. Their bodies were weak, and their gear was garbage. A world ruled by lesser beings was doomed anyway. Then his eye settled on the one still standing, the mage, shaking with a staff in hand. Argius found it a little interesting that fear hadn't broken his loyalty, though he also knew it wouldn't matter. The boy understood he couldn't handle a monster the leader couldn't beat. Then, a man showed up, saying he'd warned them this place wasn't safe. If they'd gathered info step by step, they could have come prepared. There was no point rushing a dungeon clear just to do it. The boy had no idea who this man was. He explained that the association got their distress call, and he came as part of the rescue team. He even wore armor, though it seemed heavier than he expected. The boy was shocked he came alone, and he was the only one who made it that far. Then the automaton turned on the newcomer. A huge noise rang through the forge. The boy froze in fear, while the man calmly said these things were pretty strong. Back then, Yu Xiao wasn't famous. To most people, he was nobody. Even so, he cut off the monster's arm with ease. Some first-generation explorers knew who he was, but he never cared about fame, only saving people. That day changed everything. Yu Xiao stepped in to finish the automaton. With one swing, he split it straight down the middle. That power caught Argius's attention. Looking at him, Yu Xiao figured this one would be harder. And that was the day the world learned his name. The force of that strike alone changed the light inside the dungeon. The mage couldn't believe what he had just seen. The whole squad had been struggling against one colossus, and this man killed it in one hit. Yunsheng then asked the mage if he had any mana left. Not much, the mage said, but enough to cast a blessing. Yunsheng turned it down and asked for a levitation spell instead. If the mage could do that, he should carry the other two out. They were badly hurt, but still alive. Argius found that attitude laughable. It was like this man truly believed he could walk out of there alive. Yuexing made it clear. As long as he stood there, Argius wouldn't touch the others. That set the Titan off. He attacked with full force at once, but Yuexing answered perfectly. The aura around him was overwhelming, and when their weapons met, the whole dungeon shook with the sound. As the mage retreated, he looked back in fear. 10 years after the admission, adventurers had reached a wall. They'd gained superhuman strength, and equipment had improved too, becoming better suited to each user. But even with stronger stats and better gear, skill and real combat experience were still lacking. The answer became human development, a martial art that breaks normal logic. At first, only a few believed in it, but they began studying and building those techniques. Argius did get hit. Though his armor absorbed the first blow, Yunsheng didn't stop there, and struck again. He was one of the people who truly mastered that martial art. The mage started to smile, thinking the monster was done. But that hope vanished fast. Argius admitted this man was different. He knew how to use his weapon well. If the weapon had been able to handle even half his power, the fight might have gone another way. The blade's edge had already melted from the impact. Yunsheng still couldn't afford top-class gear, and this wasn't the first axe he'd ruined. He glanced back at the people he came to save, and felt relieved. They were nearly out. Now he just had to hold off the monster in front of him. Argius' burning sword came down, and Yunsheng caught it with the axe handle. The Titan admitted his defense and dodging were some of the best he'd ever seen from a human, but the axe Yusheng carried was terrible by his standards. He could keep defending, yet the weapon itself wouldn't last much longer. As he readied another strike, Argius declared this would be the end. Yusheng had other plans. Their weapons crashed together again with monstrous force. This time, instead of redirecting it, Yusheng met the blow, head-on. That was the first form of the technique Yu Jieyong would one day learn, a skill that turns the enemy's power back on them. But when it came to strength, experience, and clean execution, his father used it on a whole different level. It was powerful enough to make the Titan step back. This was the martial art of a hero. Argius assumed humans all knew this story, the hero who beat the monster that day. But when Jieyong's father struck him, the monster inside Argius died. The life he had after that was no longer truly his, but the one Yusheng spared. What the attack squad failed to do was done by one rescuer alone. A strange ending for such a grand story. But the real part starts after that. Ancient titans never kneel to those they see as lesser. Yet Argius accepted exile under human rule. Cyphrom remembers the case because it shocked the whole world. He later got citizenship, helped by the fact that he hadn't killed anyone. Even so, he still had crimes to answer for, so he was made to forge equipment as repayment. But this version was different from what she knew. Then Argius said the staff Jieyong carried had been made as a gift for his father. His father never asked for it, but Argius believed he deserved something like that. The protagonist always thought it was just sturdy and nothing more, which is why they never pawned it. They figured it was useless. Argius said MC wasn't exactly wrong. It was only really good for smashing people with brute force. That was definitely not what they expected, and Cyphrom got stuck on the part about pawning it. Argius said the answer was simple, and he should know it already. He asked if his father ever used it as a weapon. He would have made him an axe as soon as the rest of the material for the blade arrived. But then he lost contact with him, and since he couldn't leave the dungeon, he sent what he'd already finished to Jieyong's father. He couldn't be sure, but he doubted he'd ever complete that weapon. Still, that wasn't so bad. So he asked the protagonist to give him the unfinished weapon. Now he would complete what he started, not for the father, but for the son. While the Titan worked, they headed back up. Sarum kept looking at MC, clearly curious after hearing all that. She asked how he was feeling now. He said he was fine, and it seemed like the Titan really wanted to make sure everything was okay. Jaryong didn't know how long the work would take, but Argyasset sounded set on finishing as fast as he could. Still, he warned them that masterpieces take time. Since Wednesday was a holiday, Saram asked if he'd be free then. She wanted to help him study for the written test, and he agreed that sounded useful. As they kept walking, she realized there was one more thing she wanted to say. His father must have been an amazing person. She never imagined he was the hero from that story after retiring. Jaryong said he'd go rest, and if anything came up they could talk later. He didn't answer her comment. Once in the car, she headed home and checked online, only to confirm the story people told wasn't true. That was what she'd always learned. But now arduous words were stuck in her head. Now the team that cleared the dungeon is praised as heroes, but that glory came from another adventurer's work. That makes Argus's story hard to dismiss. Still, when she thinks about Geryon's power, it's not strange that his father was someone special. And inside dungeons, the truth often gets twisted. Yushang, the so-called false dragon slayer, was once treated like one of Korea's best, until his records were exposed as fake, built on blackmail and lies. After getting hurt, he admitted it himself, and there are still articles online breaking the whole thing down. That only made her more unsure about what to believe. Then her practical exam results came out. At the school's dungeon department, a staff member gets thanked. Professor Chu apologizes to Kang for keeping her busy all weekend. Kang doesn't mind. First-year students matter, and he needs to watch them closely. She says the department is intense. Teaching is hard enough, but this freshman class is even more gifted than she was at their age. Then she asks if he really expected that student to rank first. Kang admits he didn't. A result like that is hard to predict. Saram stares at the rankings in disbelief. Several names are grouped near hers, and all of them are hybrids. The first is D.F. Choi. He got sword talent from his white class explorer father, and magic talent from his elf mother, making him an ideal magic swordsman. Second place is Anisha. Her mana and control beat even many full elves, and she has the talent to become a top mage. The last one is a boy born to a human and a dwarf. He has dwarf-like strength and toughness, with a human speed and reflexes, the best of both. This is Ter Velkason, known for having the best body on the planet, and he's a student here. Even so, he must be every bit as talented as the other two. One of them should have taken first place, so it's hard to believe she did all this by herself. Maybe the physical test boosted her score, but strength alone can't explain everything. That's why she wants him to step up more. He could become a great leader. But right now, he doesn't seem interested in getting close to anyone, and the other students are nervous about approaching him. Still, no one can go far alone forever, and he'll learn that by second year. Kang says that isn't something she needs to stress over. Sometimes changes happen quietly, and people miss the signs. He knows she truly cares about every student, but if she trusts him more than she worries, he'll figure it out. 4 days pass, and the holiday finally comes. A few boys are busy gossiping about something a girl did, when one of them bumps into a giant. He turns around ready to complain, but freezes when he sees the huge guy in front of him. The massive boy calmly apologizes, saying he was distracted and didn't notice them. That only makes them more nervous, so they quickly apologize too. Afterward, he notices his shirt got dirty. All he can think is that his luck is terrible. Really, he just misses his mom. Stuck Yubin had moved to Europe. Even though she was once a successful hunter in Korea, she used to tell her son all kinds of stories from her explorer days, and that made him admire Korea and its culture. With that chance, and his natural talent, he got into the warrior school through a special transfer exam. The problem is, he's painfully shy. He wants to talk to his classmates, but he's scared they'll laugh at him because his Korean isn't good. He hates being like this. Noticing his discomfort, the boys apologize for being so loud. Without realizing he's not annoyed at all, they're actually scared of him. So without meaning to, he's become a loner. Then he notices 2 boys nearby, talking about nothing important. They're going to a PC bang. He remembers his mother saying she used to play games in places like that. Inside there aren't many people. He has no idea what to do, and someone nearby is talking on the phone. He tries using a self-service terminal to sign in, but just standing there makes him nervous. He starts thinking he's holding everyone up, and should just leave, especially since he's alone. A young man tells him he probably doesn't have an account yet. That machine is only for people who already signed up, so he needs a different one. Then he offers to show him how it works. He only needs to enter the basic information, then pay at another machine and pick a computer. The giant thanks him, and Jaryong says it's no big deal. He figures the guy is probably a foreigner unfamiliar with the place. Still, he's mostly waiting for Sairom, who still hasn't shown up. She's late, and if she'd come on time, or if he'd gone to the black market first, he could have checked the small black object he found in the chest with the jelly. He still had no clue what it was. It felt smooth, but it definitely didn't seem edible. Since he couldn't identify it, he decided to keep it stored for now. If he really needed cash, selling the item with Enkil's blood would make more sense. The blood of one of the 3 great disasters of the Agar forest. For decades, many raid teams had tried, but no one managed to bring it down, and even a tiny amount of its blood was priceless. The government had banned hunting it, and anything made from its materials sold for a fortune. He was supposed to eat lunch with Sairam, then hit the black market that evening, but her delay ruined the plan. The foreigner says there are no other seats, and sits next to the guy who helped him. Then he tells Jaryong to sit too, since he's not waiting on anyone anymore. The protagonist takes the seat and logs in. Nothing special catches his eye, and the computer at home is way better anyway. Then he notices the game on the next screen. He asks if the foreigner plays Heroes of Chaos. He does, and their levels are close. Since Jae-young's usual teammates aren't online, the foreigner asks him to queue together. They can run ranked matches. Around Seoul, there are ruined empty zones called scars. During the invasion, whole cities were lost. Some were recovered later, but the ones too close to dungeons stayed abandoned. Now those places are used as a second defense line for humanity. There had never been any case of monsters leaving the walls on their own. There's even a transport system for moving them. One guard absolutely hates that job. While his friends earn money hunting, he's stuck driving monsters around. Cho-young tells him if he hates it that much, he should quit and return to the field. She used to be a gold-class explorer before an eye injury forced her to retire, and now she asks why he's still here. Sun Chang-woo, a bronze-class adventurer, admits he's doing it for money because he can barely get onto any teams now. Saying it out loud bruises his pride. Then something goes wrong, and they have to stop the truck. The monster couldn't have escaped, could it? She gets out and tells him to report that they stopped for an inspection. Then she goes to handle it. Back in the cab, he starts sending the message. He's worried, but his partner is skilled, so he tells himself she'll be fine. Soon, the door opens. He's ready to praise her for taking care of it, but another woman steps in instead, and says it's nothing worth bragging about. For a government worker, Cho Yena's reflexes were decent, but there must be a reason she's not in the field anymore. The woman glances at the names behind them, then she looks at the driver and asks why he's still just standing there. If he wants to live, he should start driving. Meanwhile, Jae-young and the foreigner are having a great run, and their food arrives at the perfect moment. MC hadn't expected them to be the same age. The guy didn't look older, just way bigger and more built, so he asks what school he goes to, but he never gets an answer. All of a sudden, both of them feel that something is wrong. The ground shakes, and people start wondering if it's an earthquake. It feels more like some kind of blast nearby. Everyone starts arguing and guessing what happened. A truck has crashed. Maybe the driver was drunk. One person starts recording, while another says they need to call the authorities now. From a rooftop, a girl says it would have been better if the truck had crashed closer to downtown. Explorers will flood the area soon, but she thinks she still has time to get away. Her superiors are already ordering her back. At the same time, the monsters start pouring out of the truck because she woke them all up, and the curious crowd instantly regrets staying. Horn horrors are dangerous on their own, but in groups they're far worse. Looking below, she counts about 50 people and decides to stay and watch. Maybe 100 would die before help arrived. One bystander gets grabbed by the head and is killed on the spot while another freezes in terror. The monsters go wild with helpless people right in front of them. Then a blue glow flashes through the chaos. Jae-young has arrived. His kick slams straight into the first monster's face. The people watching are left speechless. He dropped the creature with ease, fully focused on stopping the beasts before they hurt anyone else. Without even turning to the crowd, he demands to know why they're still there, and tells them to run. He's fought these monsters before. The one-horned ones shouldn't be too hard. But then he has to snap his focus back fast. A motorcycle is rushing right at him. He barely slips out of the way. Then he realizes what it is, a two-horn horror. As it charges in, Jae-young answers with a brutal kick, but the hit didn't go how he expected, and he had to step back. These monsters usually live only 5 to 6 years. Most die before growing a second horn. Only around 8% survive long enough to do that and breed. When they do, their power jumps way past normal. Still, no matter how strong or fast it is, he can beat it if he has to kill it. His foot throbs, and he realizes the real problem is how tough these things are. They're at least 3 or 4 times sturdier than that idiot who called himself a tank. If only he had one of his real weapons. The beast comes at the boy again. Jae-young avoids it, and sees just how much damage that strike caused. He backs off, resets his stance, and gets ready for the next exchange. The monster still isn't done, so the protagonist scans the area and spots a broken stop sign on the ground. He stomps it flat and pulls out the pole, turning it into a makeshift staff. Furious, the monster charges once more. Jae-young lets his aura rise and braces for the hit. Now armed, he grips the pole tight and focuses. The beast stomps down harder than he expected. That burst of force launches it over MC's head, something he didn't see coming. Now it's headed toward a group of civilians. They're frozen with fear and can't protect themselves. The beast rushes them like they're its next meal. The gap between a 2-star and 3-star monster is massive. Both are already far beyond what normal humans can handle. Regular people just die against things like this, and even veteran adventurers can struggle without gear. But there is one exception. The foreigner catches the beast's punch with his bare hand. He clearly means to fight, and one blow is enough to shove the monster back. That's the exception. People who train their bodies past human limits until they become monsters too. The beast digs its claws into the ground to stop itself from sliding. The foreigner pushed it back, but he knows bare hands won't do real damage. Then something grabs his attention. The beast lets out a threatening roar at him, while Jae-young moves in from behind with the makeshift staff. Using his technique, he drives a sharp strike into the back of the creature's neck. Even the foreigner is shocked by the result. The beast drops dead, a hole pierced through its back. Jaryong lets out a relieved breath, then a loud sound makes him turn. The foreigner hears it too, and looks over. Another explosion has gone off nearby. In just 1 minute that monster caused all this destruction. The foreigner says help still won't be here for a few more minutes. This kind of attack came out of nowhere, and people are dying while they stand here talking. Sunk knows a taunt skill, something every tank learns. It's basically a high-frequency shout that pulls nearby monsters toward him. Since he wants to become an adventurer, he decides to keep the monsters on him until rescue arrives. He tells Jaryong to hide because he can't ask a near stranger to risk his life too. After all, they've only played games together for a few hours. He tells him to use the shout already. He figures the guy must really be a tank if he knows that skill. Seok warns him it's dangerous, but Jaryong says he was going in alone anyway. If he were by himself he'd think it over more, but he's not. He tells Seok he's good at games, especially protecting people. He wants to be an adventurer too, and if he's doing this he's giving it everything. There's no more time to talk, they have to move. A store has been wrecked, and someone is hiding under the counter. Nearby, the monster has just killed another person. Seok gets ready to use his skill. Inside the shop, the beast drops the body and starts ripping apart the counter to reach its next victim. Then, Seok's shout rings out. The sound spreads through the area and pulls the monster's attention. It stops at once, leaving its would-be victim stunned. The girl who caused all this hears the shout too. Now she's curious about what just happened. After using the skill, Seok catches his breath and takes a fighting stance, ready for whatever comes. The monsters don't take long to gather where his shout came from. The strongest one points toward him, and the one-horned monsters charge first. He stands his ground, ready to fight. Then he hears something above him. A monster is attacking from his blind spot. He still manages to block the strike. It isn't enough to injure him. With his free hand, he starts focusing his aura, then slams the beast so hard it goes flying. But he can't relax yet. More monsters are closing in, ready to attack together. In the distance, the two-horned monsters notice the commotion. Then someone drops in from above, Jaryong. He lands near them and sees there are two of them, both with double horns. Looking at the crashed truck, he starts to understand. The monsters had been piling bodies inside it, which is why there weren't many left on the street. Now the two-horned beasts turn on him. The protagonist waits until they come a little closer. Fighting these things up close without gear gives them bad odds. Right now, they'd just get in each other's way if they tried to team up too tightly. So Seok will pull the weaker monsters, since he's the tank. Jaryong is already in range, and now he makes his move. His job is to bring down the strongest one. He's the damage dealer. He raises the makeshift staff. Then he darts past the monster, so fast it doesn't even notice the hit at first. A string of marks is left across its body. This pole is nothing compared to a needle, and if MC had his real staff, the fight would look very different. With ordinary material, there's only so much he can do. Even so, he keeps pushing. It isn't ideal, but there's still a chance. He remembers fighting Zeke barehanded. Those fast, heavy blows weren't overwhelming at once, but they slowly wore him down. Meanwhile, the monster is already in the middle of its next attack. Jaryong fires off a quick series of strikes to hold it back. He knows that still won't fully stop it, so he slips past the attack. One tiny mistake here would kill him. He counters again in a flash. Dangerous as this is, it's also a rare chance. A chance to get stronger. He has to use this moment and win with whatever he has. Another beast closes in to attack. In that instant, he remembers how Zeke moved during their fight, and copies that same kind of footwork. Since his father Zeke was the first person he'd met this strong. Using what he learned here, he sharpens his fourth skill. His staff starts raining blows onto the monster in front of him. After the barrage, the beast crashes to the ground, but another one suddenly grabs his foot, putting him instantly on alert. It slams him down hard enough to crack the concrete, and Jaryong spits blood from the impact. 2 against 1 is rough. Fair or not, he has to deal with it. This isn't a human fight, so the rules don't matter. Before he can recover, the tank rushes in and knocks the monster away. For the tank, luck counts as a skill too. Watching through a phone camera, 2 bystanders are stunned. Those 2 just took down dozens of monsters without any gear. Dong-yoon is thrilled he caught all of it on video. His friend reminds him he only stayed because he was too scared to run. Ken wants to know who these 2 even are. They look younger than them. From what they just did, they must be gold-level hunters. Maybe they're students from the warrior school, or rookies, no one knows yet. Either way, he's uploading the clip and asks his friend to make a thumbnail on the laptop. The story will spread fast, and he doesn't want to miss out on millions of views. Worn out, the foreigner thinks the rescue team should have arrived by now, but in the end, only the 2 of them were able to stop this. Jaryong says sorry for ruining his cool moment, but he needs a hand getting off the ground. At last, they shake hands. Both are exhausted. When he's asked if he's okay, he says not really. Maybe he's got a fracture or 2, but compared to what he expected, it could have been worse. The foreigner is amazed. Jaryong handled 2 double-horned monsters. The protagonist gives credit right back. His new friend fought 9 monsters and still came to help at the end. The foreigner brushes it off, saying his were only 2-star beasts. Since they're already talking, he asks what school MC attends. He'd heard the schools around here weren't all that good. Then he quickly apologizes, saying he didn't mean to insult his school. He just assumed he went to the warrior school too. Instead of answering, Jaryong asks where his friend ranks and how many students there are above him. The foreigner says he isn't sure. He barely talks to anyone, and even after some tests, he doesn't know if they measured him right. If he had to guess, he's somewhere in the middle. Now he's thinking about how he'll help his elf friend. Still, there's one last thing to deal with. He asks if that monster plans to stay on top of the truck forever. It was the only one the taunt didn't pull, so something about it might be different. Still, he doubts that's the truly special one. There's blood all around the truck, so there must be something else inside, and that's probably the real problem. For now, he thinks they should watch it, since they can handle this last monster easily. Then a loud noise comes from inside the truck, and it starts shaking hard. A hand suddenly pushes out through the hole in the roof. Both boys are caught off guard. Something suddenly yanks the monster back inside the wagon. Its claws can't keep their grip. Whatever's in there is clearly eating it. The horned horrors live in groups kind of like tribes. The two horned ones act like parents and chiefs, each leading a pack of less than 10. Because they're weak and dungeons are brutal, these tribes join up to survive. They're low on the food chain, so stronger predators keep their numbers down. But sometimes a mutant is born with a third horn. That one isn't just a tribe leader, it's a king that can command hundreds, even thousands. A horned horror king is around 5-star level. They quickly spotted the two boys, and both of them instantly realized the danger. With one small motion, the king fired off a huge attack, forcing them both to dodge at once. Then it moved so fast, it was already on top of Jaryong. He had to react right away or die. The monster's blow was strong enough to smash his makeshift staff. It tore through his guard and slammed into his stomach. And before he could recover, the king was already throwing a kick. That strike never landed. Chulking grabbed the beast in a body lock. Its feet ripped through the pavement as Chulking shoved it back. But then things got worse. The king caught him with both hands. It lifted him like he weighed nothing. Then the king drove Chulking into the ground and left a huge crater. What they were missing most was time. They were two prodigies who might one day reach incredible heights, but maybe not today. Even with all their skill, the gap between them and this monster was just too big. Jaryong forced himself up and shouted for it to stop. The king turned to him, its red aura already surging in for another attack. Unable to defend himself, the protagonist took the blow head on, and the beast seemed satisfied for a second. Then it sensed something else, something on the battlefield far more dangerous than the king. Night had fallen, and Yusong still lay betrayed in a hospital bed. Hardly anyone knew him before he vanished, but now even this monster was terrified. No one can fully explain what Yusong left behind. 11 years earlier, a lot had happened, and one man suddenly stepped in front of the press. He confessed to every crime and begged the public to forgive him. That confession shook the whole world. 12 hours before this fight, Sairom had still been stuck in confusion. What she learned that Sunday was all she could think about. For days, she dug into Jaryong's father, trying to find out if he'd been framed. She knew plenty of people would want the spot of a former number one, who had lost his power. What confused her was how the case unfolded. First the accusations, then the victim statements, then the case kept building. People were split, and because he was so famous, the fake claims didn't fully ruin his image at first. If Sairom had been in his place, she would have fought to the end. But Yusung, he did the opposite. Instead of defending himself, he accepted every charge. After that press conference, even his fans abandoned him, and overnight he became a liar in everyone's eyes. She couldn't understand why. If someone had forced him, admitting it all only made things worse. Maybe she was the only one who noticed, but his expression felt strange. He didn't look falsely accused. He looked like he was accepting punishment. Then she found something even stranger. His records showed no family at all. That made her wonder if Jaryong was really his son. Still, it made more sense that MC just wasn't officially listed, especially since the two did look alike. Maybe Yunqing accepted all those accusations because he was tied to it somehow. And right then, he had no idea what was happening to his body. He stared at his hand and felt that something had changed. The beast came at him in a rage. It kept pushing forward, knowing it had to kill the boy now. And facing that, Jaryong realized one thing for sure. His body could still move. His timing was perfect, and he smashed the monster in the face. That was all that mattered. He could move. So he set out to crush the monster in front of him, chaining skill after skill into a non-stop assault. The pressure was overwhelming. The beast did everything it could to block, then tried to retreat from Jaryong's barrage. But the protagonist knew it wasn't getting away. The monster fired back, but even with its powerful aura, it wasn't fast enough to catch him. Then it revealed the trap. It was already above him in midair, and attacked again from close range. The result shocked it almost instantly. The blow hadn't hurt the boy at all. MC answered with a brutal kick. The impact launched the beast straight into a nearby building. Even then, Jaryong knew the fight wasn't done, but those last two hits had shown him an opening. A clean shot to the chin with his needle. In this state he could actually land it. Then, just as suddenly as it came, that strange aura disappeared. It couldn't have happened at a worse time. The monster dragged itself out of the crater while Jaryong felt the power leave his body. Now he had nothing left to stop the next attack. As the beast rushed in, it noticed too late the truck container was dropping right onto its head. It got hit, but there's a reason. Explorers have different roles. Each role exists for a specific job, and that container wasn't enough to stop the beast. Completely enraged, it charged Chulking. He couldn't dodge, so he braced himself and took the hit as best he could. The blow was brutal, but as a tank, even badly hurt, he held on. That's what a tank is meant to do. Still, he had already gone far past his limit. Even so, his toughness bought them a little more time, and that gave Jaryong the chance to launch his strongest attack. The monster knew it couldn't avoid it. His aura-covered fist rushed in and snapped up in a perfect uppercut, crushing the creature's chin. That's the job of the one who deals damage. When the dust settled, the beast was dead, its jaw shattered. And all of this started because a monster transport truck had been stolen. That theft led to dozens of civilian deaths. Only after everything was over did the rescue team finally arrive. The story spread around the world almost right away, and the two boys were quickly praised as heroes. Cabalino watches the video, trying to understand what he's seeing. Jaryong remembers being young, scraped up, and getting his wound treated. His father told him even small cuts need care. If you ignore them, they can get worse later. The protagonist asked if his father ever felt pain, since he always bled so much fighting monsters. His father said yes, he felt pain, and he felt fear too, but he hid it as best he could, because his job was to keep others from getting hurt. When Jaryong was little, more than anything, he wanted to be like his father. Still, one thought always stayed with him. He knew his father didn't want that life for him. Whenever they talked about it, his father told him to choose another path, and always looked sad. Maybe that was why he never wanted MC to become an explorer, but he never explained it clearly. Jaryong thought he'd understand once he was older. Now that answer could never come. He opened his eyes and looked up at a strange ceiling, yet something about it felt oddly familiar. Someone beside him asked if those words were meant for him. Startled, the protagonist turned his head. It was Zeke. He said MC was only alive because he was stubborn enough to hold on. He asked why the director was sitting there with him. The moment he tried to sit up, pain hit his whole body, and Zeke told him not to move too much. The treatment worked, but with injuries that bad, he should have been in a coma. Full recovery would take a month. Until then, Zeke told him to focus on healing. There was a lot they needed to get ready for. Jaryong thanked him and said helping was the right thing to do. But there was something he wanted to ask. Zeke cut in first. If this was about his father, then yes, they knew each other and had worked together. The protagonist suddenly moved his hand, fast enough to make Zeke tense up, but Jaryong only grabbed the apple Zeke was holding. Noticing that look, he asked if Zeke thought he was about to hit him. Zeke admitted that wasn't the reaction he expected. MC said he had no idea what kind of reaction Zeke wanted, but he only wanted to know if Zeke had known his father. From how differently Zeke treated him now, it seemed like they were more than co-workers. Holding the apple, he took a deep breath. He remembered telling Zeke to get out and die, or cut off his own arm with a knife just to prove a point. Maybe Zeke thought he still meant those words, so Jaryong asked how convincing his act had been. He said he really tried to make it believable, and apologized if Zeke took it personally. Zeke brushed it aside and said he expected a much more emotional response once he learned the truth. Maybe he would have gotten that reaction 3 years ago. Back then, revenge was all the protagonist could think about. He wanted to punish everyone who abandoned his father and pushed him into this state. So Zeke asked what changed his mind. Jaryong figured he just grew up and realized what he felt before was madness. He isn't even strong enough to beat Zeke, so revenge is out of reach. Right now, the most important thing is making enough money for the hospital. That's his focus. He doesn't know when a cure will come, but he'll do whatever he can until it does. No matter what stands in his way, he'll get past it. Zeke says he's here because he has a few questions. Zeke asks why Jaryong was never officially listed as Sung's child, and who looked after him after his father became Madridan. MC says his father raised him alone, and revealing whose son he was would have put him in danger. He adds that he basically grew up by himself, and Zeke can tell he's telling the truth. Then Zeke asks if he knows the name Dugawaniwig, but Jaryong has never heard it. It isn't a person, it's a dragon, the destroyer of worlds, and the source of the poison ruining his father. Worse, it's one of the deadliest dragons still alive. Even hearing the word dragon scares people. After the invasion, the walls were built with help from other races, and explorers got strong enough that Kamemimi was no longer close to extinction. Still, rare disasters could happen, like something powerful enough to break those walls. That's what dragons can do. They're stronger, smarter, and trickier than any other race, and they've often shown hostility toward humans. Out of all monsters, dragons are easily the most dangerous. They don't exactly hate humans, they see them as something to rule and use. Their big mistake was looking down on humanity. They thought people would never conquer the dungeons, so they didn't move right away. After the world fell into chaos, they planned to act like gods and offer protection in return for worship. Jaryong jokes that maybe humans should be grateful. They stayed out of it at first, but once things stopped going their way, the dragons started attacking. That was when his father stepped in. Through planning and grit, he became the explorer who proved dragons could be killed. Once word spread that he had slain one, everything started shifting. The protagonist says he heard this part before, that the dragons went into hiding, but Zeke corrects him. They didn't hide, they changed tactics. Dragons are sly enough to even change their appearance. Since brute force wasn't enough to wipe out humanity, they began slipping into human society instead. The information is classified, and Zeke is only telling him because he's Sung's son. Dugawaniwig was the last dragon Sung chased before he got sick. If that dragon is killed, they may be able to make a cure for Sung. So if Jae-young wants to face that mission someday, he has to become much stronger, because Zeke plans to help him kill the dragon. By now, MC is already strong enough to get out of bed. While standing by the window, he studies the card he was given. He remembers being told to forget about it if it seemed impossible. But if there was even a real chance to help his father, he couldn't ignore it. Zeke, though, makes it clear this choice isn't his yet. If Jae-young wants that chance, he has to climb to the top. The dragons have already blended into society under fake identities, waiting for the right time. Even if someone had proof, exposing them without capturing one would accomplish nothing. Move too early, and the dragons will disappear again, while the whole world panics. So the strike has to be fast and exact. To do that, a special team has been built in recent years to hunt Dugawaniwig. Every member is a veteran adventurer with the skill to bring down a dragon. If Jae-young isn't strong enough, then no matter how badly he wants in, the team won't accept him. They can't afford someone who might hold them back. That would ruin the mission and put everyone in danger. If all of this is real, he asks how long he has. He knows they won't wait forever. Zeke says they still don't know the dragon's exact location, but expect to find it within 2 years. And like the protagonist said, when that time comes, no one will wait for him. Before leaving, Zeke says the protagonist can hate him if he wants, or never see him again, but he promises one thing. With or without MC, they will hunt that dragon down no matter what. Those words stay with Jae-young. For the first time, he sees a real chance to save his father. It was exactly what he had always wanted to hear, that a cure might actually exist. It gave him hope, but also something else. Fear. Fear that he won't get strong enough before the mission, that could save his father and avenge him too. What he has now isn't enough, but he'll get there no matter what it costs. For so long there was no hope of a cure. Now suddenly, there is no hope of a cure. Now suddenly, there is. That tiny bit of hope gives Jae-young more drive than he's ever felt. While washing up, he hears the door open, and the nurse is glad to see him awake. She asks if he's in pain, and he says it's mostly muscle soreness. The doctor will explain more, but she says he'll feel like that for a few more days. His arm had to be almost completely rebuilt. When they brought him in, it was in terrible shape. They had to be extremely careful, or he could have lost it. A high-level healer is the reason the surgery worked. Looking at his arm, Jae-young asks about something else. He wants to know what happened to the friend who fought beside him. The nurse says his friend recovered amazingly well and was discharged the same day. Hearing that, he starts wondering how long he's been in the hospital. Before he can ask, the nurse shyly asks for a photo with him. She snaps a quick selfie on the spot. After that, Jae-young asks if he can leave too. She says yes, but warns him not to go out the front. Reporters are all over the hospital, waiting to interview him the second he steps outside. He can't figure out why, so the nurse says he should see for himself. When she shows him her phone, he's stunned. The whole thing could have become a disaster. Without him and his friend, hundreds of people might have died. Now everyone wants to know who he is, and reporters have been flooding the hospital ever since. She hands him a bag and says his friend asked her to give it to him. If he wants to keep his identity hidden, he should use what's inside and slip out through the back. Sejrom prepared it, and there's probably a spell on it to help hide who he is. But when Jae-young opens the bag, he finds a rope inside. Not exactly the escape plan he wanted. With no better choice, he throws the rope out the window and climbs down to the ground. From above, the nurse calls after him and tells him not to worry about the photo. She'll only post it once he becomes a famous explorer. Jae-young waves back, still not fully grasping how big this has become. Sejrom is waiting in her car, already expecting him to come there so they can leave. The protagonist asks if the rope was really the only option. Instead of answering, she asks if he would rather have been caught. He admits no, but then asks about the bag in the car. Sejrom says she bought him some clothes and a new phone, assuming his old one was destroyed. He's clearly touched, but she tells him not to make a big deal out of it. Honestly, she doesn't even know where to start after everything that happened. A disaster broke out right next to him, and somehow he beat that monster. Still, she knows crazy things keep happening around him, so she asks where they're going now. What she really wants is rest, but they only have today. If he wants custom gear, they need to go now. He says he already has clothes, but Sejrom means explorer gear, and he should know how lucky he is. The best tailor in the world agreed to make his armor. Armor materials fall into 3 groups, starting with normal cloth. It has the weakest defense, but support magic works well on it, so mages and healers who stay off the front lines usually wear it. The second type is steel, which is very durable, but dungeon metal is so dense that only people with real strength and stamina can wear it. Leather sits in the middle, not too heavy, but still sturdy. That makes it perfect for someone like him who fights up close and focuses on damage. Maybe it's finally time for him to start wearing armor. Sejrom is also dying to know how he beat the monster. She wants the full story, but Jae-young says someone recorded it, so she can watch that. The problem is, the video only shows him beating the owl and the 2-horned ones. It doesn't show how he took down the 5-star monster, which shocks him because he didn't even know it ranked that high. He figured it had to be strong. Even with Sok Shulkang fully prepared, they still shouldn't have won. Then that strange power appeared, and he still can't explain it. Sejrom pushes again, asking why he won't just tell her what happened. But he really doesn't know how to put it into words. It just happened. That doesn't sound believable. Even pros need a full team to fight a monster like that. She knows he's not lying, but it's still hard to accept. All it does is remind her that geniuses really are different. Even so, she warns him to be careful. Things are about to get tiring. It's not only reporters anymore. Both of them are now right in the middle of the whole mess. Sok Chelkong had it rough too, and spent 4 straight days doing interviews, even ending up on TV. Even then, he avoided saying much about Jaeryong. He wouldn't answer even basic questions like MC's name without permission. That makes him remember the favor he asked from him. If anyone asked what really happened, Sok was supposed to say he didn't know either. Since he wanted to keep his identity secret if possible, Sok agreed to cover for him. Anisha asked how the two of them got so close, but Jaeryong really had no answer. She told him to stay out of sight until he could take the entrance exam. He asked why, and just then his manager texted, saying they needed to talk soon. Anisha had been looking into the exam, and the more she read, the harder it seemed. Lately, only 1 out of 100 people pass. The protagonist figured a lot of applicants only take it on a whim, and if that's true, they still have to be weaker than Anisha. When she got annoyed, he quickly said he wasn't calling her weak. Then she told him to shut up. Still, he wasn't really wrong. She had huge potential, but she told him he was missing the point. People who aren't strong enough don't go in alone. They move in groups, and that's when he finally understood. The exam is taken in teams, and most candidates are children of adventurers. Because of that, their parents' connections help them build teams ahead of time. Almost everyone applying comes from that kind of background, and they're usually the ones who pass. If Jaeryong's identity gets out, people will swarm him right away. The school says it discourages that, but that's not how things really work. He could even aim for special admission, but that's not what he wants. What he needs to know is how the ones without help still make it in. He planned to beat them all and open his own path. She liked his drive, even if it sounded a little naive. Then she said she wanted to change clothes. After pointing out the bathroom, she told him to get changed and meet her at the end of the hall. At the front desk, the secretary was busy working. Anisha said she had an appointment with the place's CEO. The secretary asked her to wait a few minutes. She made a call and let him know a guest had arrived. Then she said he wanted to explain what happened, but he had an urgent commitment and couldn't come. That was a problem, since there wasn't another open day for this. He offered to make it up to her, but Anisha said this wasn't about money. She needed this for the warrior school entrance exam, and the cancellation could ruin everything. At that point, someone nearby said Anisha looked familiar. The other person couldn't quite place her name. Among adventurers, people often say this generation grew up very differently. The first generation paid in blood to move the world forward. Since then, technology improved, and the next generation was born into much better conditions. Those pioneers retired and gave their children everything they could. They passed down more than talent. They gave them top training from early childhood. So when people ask who benefited most from all that, many point to one girl. That girl was Gayun, and Anisha recognized her as a first-year student at the warrior school. Gayun asked if Anisha knew her, since she was the student council president. Then she said they could skip the formal introductions. Her uncle was the CEO, and the reason he suddenly had an urgent commitment was her. She knew Anisha was upset about the cancelled meeting, but really it was more like Gayun took her spot. She added that if Anisha helped her out, that would make the story sound much better. Anisha knew how much influence Gayun had. She'd already heard plenty about what that girl could do. While they were talking, Jarine walked in. Since Gayun was Anisha's senior, it seemed they had no real choice but to go along. Even without knowing her, he thanked Gayun, but he wasn't done. Right after that, he told her to drop the fake niceness and leave already. She clearly didn't expect that, and the secretary got nervous on the spot. Gayun just grinned and said the kid had guts. Then she asked who he was. Anisha tried to stop things before they went any further. Her hand shook a little, like Gayun's words had struck her directly. Jaeryong instantly understood what had happened. Gayun hadn't been talking to him at all. Anisha knew she wasn't supposed to speak up, but it still felt like she'd been slashed. Gayun hadn't asked that idiot anything, so Anisha should stay in her place and keep quiet. MC stepped in and introduced himself. He was 17 and lived in Guanaku. He was 180 centimeters tall, didn't know his current weight, and his favorite food was sausage with stir-fried vegetables. That was enough for introductions. What mattered was that he was getting ready to enter the warrior school, and right now, he was seriously disappointed. Because even there, people like her acted like they were far greater than they really were. Gayun smiled in a way that looked almost crazy, her hand shaking with anger. Now Jaeryong understood exactly how Anisha felt. She said she didn't completely hate people like him, at least not if they could back up their big talk. He wanted into that school, yet he hadn't even taken the test and was already acting like he belonged there. He only smiled and asked if that was how she handled things. Then he said he was curious, since this was his first time trying it. He wanted to know if he'd met her standards. That only irritated her more. Then her uncle called out to her from afar. This was Xiongwu, and he demanded to know what they were doing there. He asked why she came without telling him, especially after snatching the phone from his hand. It had only been a week since her last incident. Just 1 week. Did she want her father getting angry again? Xiongwu apologized to both of them, saying his niece had a habit of doing whatever she wanted. Anisha told him he didn't need to apologize, but she was still grateful. As far as she was concerned, this was all just Gayun causing trouble. Still, the rumors were true. She was proud, and only respected strength. Jaeryong asked Anisha to come closer. He wanted to know what that annoying girl actually did, because she clearly wasn't some ordinary upperclassman. Anusha explained that Garyun was the student council president. In other words, she was the strongest student in the whole school right now. Students there get temporary gem rank licenses, which let them enter dungeons under pro supervision. With that license, they can use school breaks to explore dungeons and build real experience before becoming full adventurers. But student council members are treated differently. Even before official registration, they're viewed almost like pros and carry influence inside the school. They can even join teams fighting 5-star monsters, or worse, they're seen as the next generation of ranked warriors. Since Gagun was in her 3rd year, she should have been 2 years older than them, but she was still only in her 2nd year, so Jiri-young asked if she'd failed. Anisha said no. Gayun had taken the position from the former president. That made him ask how that was even possible. Anisha reminded him that the school runs on strength more than anything. Students can join the council starting in the 1st semester of 2nd year, and Gayun did exactly that. Then she drew her sword and challenged every council member. Before that semester even ended, she'd beaten them all, and became the youngest student council president in school history. After all that, Gayun looked ready to leave. Anisha felt relieved that things hadn't gotten worse, but Jaryong called out and said he wanted to make a bet with her. Since she was busy, he said it would be quick. He'd heard she was famous, so there had to be some reason she acted like such a jerk. The bet was simple. If he lost, she could have the appointment slot. Anisha tried to apologize for him, sure he had completely lost his mind. But if it was a real bet, Gayun had to risk something too. Jaryong liked that she was smart, then asked if she knew shadowboxing. It was a basic close-range combat drill. Whoever touched the other person first, or forced them into a bad position, won. If he lost, she'd get the time slot, and that worked well, since there was little chance of a serious injury. But if she lost, then once he entered the school, she had to give him her seat as president. That sounded completely insane. There was no way she'd agree to that, and yet the idea interested her enough that she accepted. Only after that did she finally ask the boy's name. They couldn't do it in the hallway, so they moved to a workshop where gear durability was tested. Soon, both of them were set. Gayun was sure she'd win. Jaryong looked just as confident. Anisha, on the other hand, was a nervous wreck. To her, this was pointless. Their issue had already been settled. On top of that, he was badly hurt, and even if he somehow won, Gayun would never really step down. Jaryong calmly said he wasn't trying to win right now. Anisha had no idea what to say. Even healthy, he shouldn't stand a chance. Gayun was far too strong, so why make the bet at all? The protagonist told her not to worry. He knew she was confused, but she should trust him more. In the end, it wouldn't be a bad trade. Anisha still couldn't figure out what he was aiming for. She guessed he planned to lose on purpose just to bring out Gayun's better side, but even that sounded too dumb to be true. Songwo said all he could do was apologize. He knew Gayun was supposed to lead people, but instead of being open, she kept being brutally harsh. He apologized to Anisha again, and she repeated that it wasn't needed. Still, none of this would have happened if Jaryong weren't so stubborn too. Shangwu, though, didn't fully agree with Gayun's side either. Even without knowing the boy, he could tell MC was unusually confident. Then Gayun said he must have already noticed she'd only use one arm to make things a little fairer. Jaryong brushed that off, saying it would just give her an excuse when she lost. That bold answer interested her even more, and she settled into position. Then in an instant she vanished. He barely had time to react, but he still dodged the first strike. That shocked both Anisha and Sungwoo, though for very different reasons. Anisha was stunned by how fast Gayun had moved. Her attack was almost impossible to see. In this kind of training, someone has to risk leaving an opening, but Gayun didn't hesitate for even a second. She attacked at full speed, driven by her pride. Sarome knows she never could have reacted that fast. Then the tailor finally speaks. Han asks if anyone else has brought this up before. He wants to know if this student is really getting ready to transfer into the warrior school. From the records he received, the boy is clearly gifted, but seeing him in person goes way past what Han expected. He used to be a spirited adventurer too. He can tell Jaryong isn't trying to show off. He's trying to figure out exactly who he's facing. Gayun is already strong for her age, and with a bit more experience, she'd match the lower-ranked fighters. The protagonist wants to know what level he's aiming for, and how far away he still is. Up to now, he's dodged everything with real skill. After avoiding several hits, he finally makes a little space. Gayun says it's been a while. Since joining the school, no one has dodged her this long. She's honestly impressed. She never thought he'd hold out this well, and his arm isn't the only problem. The way he looks now, he's nowhere near full strength. But Jaryong tells her she hasn't seen his best yet, so she shouldn't jump to conclusions. Then, in a quieter voice, she admits she saw how fast he was against the Horn Horror. She watched that video over and over. She's a fan of the unknown hero. Going back to normal, she offers a draw and says they can finish this another day. Once he gets into the school and fully recovers, they can continue. She doesn't want this to end here. Her uncle can step in if needed, but Jaryong says he doesn't buy that. That confidence throws her off. She still can't read him. He's not accepting a draw, especially with the student council president spot on the line. If he's not backing down, then there's no point wasting time. He gets ready to keep going, but all three of them think the same thing. He's bluffing. He's giving up the best opening he's had since the wager started. That's a shame because she likes people with drive. What he showed just now wasn't drive, it was stupidity. Jae-young gives her a faint smile and steps forward. Right after that, he makes the first move. Now he's the one attacking. To her own surprise, Jae-young gets completely drawn in. Even her uncle didn't see that coming. Jae-young throws everything into a strike and barely misses her. Sarom realizes he hadn't been holding back after all. That means the tailor had judged him completely wrong. MC wasn't only measuring himself against Ga-yoon. In that brief exchange, he studied her movements and copied them. He's a monster. This stopped being about winning or losing. What he really wants is Ga-yoon's technique. As he finishes the attack, he says that's how she did it. Growing up as a smuggler, he lived by one rule. She shouldn't just stand there watching. He still wants to see more. And the rule is simple. Never make a deal at a loss. Technique isn't only about hitting hard enough to drop someone. It's about polishing every movement, so a person can get the most out of their body. That includes how you breathe and even how you step. What matters is timing. People spend years, sometimes their whole lives, trying to perfect that. They learn through repetition, mistakes, and trying again. Then that knowledge gets passed down, so the next group can improve it even more. No matter how talented you are, you can't beat the limits of knowledge alone. Ga-yoon was born talented, so she grew strong on her own. But after puberty, her growth slowed, and she ran into a harsh truth, a wall she couldn't pass. If he wanted to get stronger, he had to break his own wall too, so he tears off the sling that was holding him back. He asks why she's hesitating, when he already made himself clear. He's sure he'll enter the school, and she already said she'd gladly teach a rookie like him. So maybe the real reason she's stopping now is that she doesn't want to lose, and he gets that. That leaves her speechless for a second. Then she asks her uncle if he remembers what she requested before. An attack squad wanted to recruit her, and he told her to go meet them to build her name. She says she'll do it, but in return, he can't stop her now. That makes him nervous, and he asks what she's planning. Ga-yoon turns back to Jae-young and says he wanted to see her dodge. If that's what he wants, she'll show him. Now it's his job to make her avoid his attack, but she's already moving in with a kick at him. He watches the strike closely, waiting for the gap. Without taking the hit, he finds it. Every move has a start, an end, and a transition between them. If you read those parts well enough, you can tell what comes next. Ga-yoon uses that against people. By skipping certain steps, she tricks anyone watching her. That makes her next move hard to predict, and it also makes her seem even faster than she really is. This style was built over decades by Ga-yoon's father. He became famous for using it perfectly. The technique is called Flash, an extremely fast movement style, and Jae-young just used it twice in a row, in a way even Ga-yeon hasn't fully mastered. You can't copy something like this just by knowing the idea. It takes flexibility, reflexes, and most of all, time. One mistake and it falls apart. Even her father didn't master it until after he was past 20, and that was at his peak. It took him 3 months just to begin understanding it. He had to refine it just to spar with his niece, yet this boy is already doing it with ease. As Han notices, Jae-young's body is in awful shape. After all that, he's nearly out of energy. Even so, he moves like someone in perfect condition. There's a look of satisfaction on his face, like he's already sure he can grow even stronger. It's not a normal way to learn, but he has a strong reason to chase more power, and now he knows exactly how. He didn't learn because he had to. He learned because he found out it was fun. At this point, he doesn't even feel his injuries or the strain in his lungs. All he wants is to keep pushing Ga-yeon. She quickly realizes she's in trouble, as Jae-young pressures her with the technique he just learned. He's about to make contact, and she has no answer. That forces Han to step in. The whole place goes silent. Han plants himself right between them. Ga-yeon had told him not to interfere, but she's still glad it ended before he had to do more. Even so, it's frustrating, because Ga-yeon admits she lost the bet, but Jae-young says the same thing about himself. Now neither side can settle it. She had said she wouldn't use her hands, but he never agreed to that condition. Hands or not, he still got hit. Maybe she's saying it out of pride, but honestly, she doesn't think she's that amazing. Then her uncle says they don't need to decide a winner right now. He blames himself for letting it go this far, and with Jae-young's condition, continuing would be dangerous, so he says they should call it a draw and treat it as a lesson for both of them. Once the boy is fully healed, they can have a proper match. If that's his decision, Ga-yeon glares at Jae-young and tells him to listen. They'll meet again at school, and if he fails to get in or loses to someone else before losing to her, she'll never forgive him. No matter what, the fight was a huge learning experience for him. As she heads out, Ga-yeon asks Sairom's name, and Sairom gives it. Ga-yeon says that if Sairom is the one backing the protagonist, then she wants to apologize. She doesn't know how good Sairom is as an adventurer, but she clearly isn't useless. She has a sharp eye for people, and MC wasn't the only one who enjoyed today. Now the two of them sit on a couch and wait. The waiting is driving him crazy. Sairom is relieved he doesn't need a hospital after all this, though he almost seems to wish he did. She's also surprised Ga-yeon admitted she lost. From what Sairom saw, Jae-young won, but he doesn't think so. In his eyes, he broke the rules first. The moment he took off the sling to attack, neither of them was really fighting to win anymore, so he was the first one to cross that line. By the end, he was going all out, and if his hit had landed, she could have been badly hurt. If he were in her place, he says he would have used his hands too. There was no other option. Cyrome asks what would have happened if both of them had fought at full power. For someone who didn't want him fighting, she got pretty caught up in it. Then he rises from the couch. He realizes they've arrived. 2 people finally come in. Cyrome turns to look. It's Han, thanking them for waiting so long. He even brought pizza for them. After they eat, he apologizes. His niece caused trouble, and really he should have taken them out somewhere nice. But Jaryong is already grateful for the pizza. For him, food just needs to be plentiful. As an adventurer, he can eat 5 times more than normal. Cyrome hadn't even thought of that. He'd been unconscious for 4 days without eating. Han goes on to explain that his workshop doesn't use leather, but something close to it. They make it from fibers taken from high-class monsters, combining them to create the best gear for each person. The material is lighter and tougher than leather. After seeing Jaryong, Han already knows what mix of material and what kind of outfit would suit him best. He's seen what he can do, and already has his personal details, but one question still bothers him. The last step in production is soaking the material in oil to make it stronger and longer lasting. Cyrome already knew that, which is why she asked for the highest grade material. The problem is that, right now, getting that oil is almost impossible. It comes from the voracious whale of the deep sea. They used to control this material completely, but after some unexpected trouble, nobody hunts those creatures anymore. There are other options they can use instead, and in real use the difference is tiny. Still, that would mean breaking the contract and making a mistake that never should have happened. So if they want to back out now, that's fine too. He can even send them to a top leather craftsman instead. He's also ready to make up for the time they lost. Yeyu Jaryong says that's fine with him. If the quality gap is small, he doesn't care. He doesn't even use fancy gear anyway. More than that, he wants equipment made by Han. Then he asks if Han was the one who trained his niece. He doesn't know much about gear, but he'd trust it more if it came from someone strong. So if that's true, he wants Han to make it. Cyrome had a feeling something was up that day. Han says it's already been 10 years since he retired, but he still appreciates hearing that. The compliment clearly makes him happy. Cyrome, meanwhile, has no clue where all the food disappeared to. Since they're trusting him, he promises to make the best equipment he can. Then he brings up how frustrated he still is about what happened last week. There was a hunt, and he thought it would bring in some great materials. He asks if they've heard of the Imperial Wasp, and Cyrome mentions royal jelly. But that monster also has another material equipment makers value a lot. It's called black wax, the stuff used to shield the queen. Only a small number of them can make it. Han shows Yu Jaryong his phone and asks if this is what he meant. There's a picture on it, though he had to sketch it out after losing his old phone. Han is surprised the boy has actually seen it in person. The truth is, Yo the protagonist smuggled it before, but what he says is that he saw it at Cyrome's house. Guess rich people really do have everything. Now Yu Jaryong is headed to the hospital. There's someone he should meet before going in. It'll take about an hour, and the manager should be free by then too. Han asks if he's eaten already. He has, but he's still willing to eat again. As long as Han helps pay, of course. The door to Yu Jaryong's room opens slowly. He says he has to hang up for now, but tells them to call once they arrive. The plan for his day just changed. Zeke says it's been a while, and Caballino suggests they continue outside. The two had already talked at the hospital 11 days ago. Making a scene in MC's room wouldn't help anyone. A strike team led by one man had fallen apart, and if that was all, they might have stayed silent. Caballino remarks that Zeke still knows how to get under people's skin. They used to be on the same side, but things clearly aren't friendly now. Just seeing him again gets Zeke worked up. Caballino, also called Zhao Wan, is a retired adventurer who used to rank 5th. Since they're allies now, he tells Zeke to stop talking and follow. Cyrome starts wondering how many more surprises her friend has left. She also wants to ask about the black wax. She figures it was the item inside the chest, and she thinks she should have known. Yu Jaryong didn't even know what it was, but he still thanks her for dealing with it quietly. Since Argoralf, nothing has gone smoothly, so now she asks if he's busy. He is. He has someone to meet. If it's not too far, she offers him a ride. Right then, her phone starts buzzing. It's her uncle Zeke. She asks Yu Jaryong to wait a moment, and he agrees, since he still has time before his meeting. The tailor comments that the nights are getting cold this time of year, and asks if Cyrome already left. She only stepped away to make a call, so she'll be back soon. He says that's fine. He just came out for a quiet smoke. Then he tells him the skill he used today is called Flash. It was created by his brother Diev's father, and he helped develop it too. That makes the protagonist instantly embarrassed. He quickly apologizes. He says he should have guessed the creator's family was here, and he's sorry for copying it without permission, but the tailor didn't come to complain. There's no exclusive claim over something like that. They're careful about who they teach, sure, but learning it by watching isn't wrong, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. If a skill can be copied, more people using it is only natural. Still, this one isn't easy to copy at all. At first he thought Yu Jaryong's basics were weak, because no one had trained him properly, but after seeing that fight he changed his mind. If MC had ever been lazy, he wouldn't have held on to the fundamentals that well. He doesn't know what kind of life taught him like this, but he does have some advice. He is talented, and with enough time and effort, he'll see what he's really capable of. Becoming a great adventurer won't be the hard part for him. That kind of potential is real and close, but But this world doesn't always celebrate prodigies. Some people will admire him and help him. Others will be ruled by jealousy and try to use him or crush him. Yu Jerryong asks if that means he should hide his talent, but the answer is no. He should never hide it. He probably couldn't even if he tried, and doing that would only make people look down on him. So he should live the way he thinks is right, and show people who he really is, a genius no one can reach. As long as he has the ability, he should give everything he has, and take in every useful technique he can find. Even if that causes trouble, he still shouldn't lower his head like he just did. He should look up and speak clearly. In the end, the strongest decide what's right and wrong. If he learns a technique and makes it his own, he can even say it belongs to him. The tailor knows that may sound harsh, but among adventurers, strength rules. His niece lives by that idea more than anyone, and he has no plans to tone her down. She's demanding, but nobody will ever look down on her, and he thinks Yu Jerryong should be the same. Just then, Sang Kram comes back and calls for her friend. She's surprised to see the tailor there too, but says her uncle wants to speak with him. She doesn't know why, but she stresses that he really should go. She already knew he'd be there, so she asked if the boy was around too, because she wanted to talk to him. He takes the phone, and Zeke apologizes if he interrupted something. He didn't expect to contact him this soon, but a problem came up, and he needs to see him right away. Yu Jerryong is caught off guard, but he gets the message and agrees to come immediately. They head through an abandoned route, a hidden path that leads into the dungeon through the subway access lines. This route belongs to their side. Zeke is waiting there with torn clothes, and he says someone is inside. He didn't want to call Yu Jerryong, but that person said they'd rather die than let Zeke heal them, so he had no choice. The protagonist doesn't know the full story, but it's obvious those two don't get along. It sounds like Zeke and the manager had some kind of falling out. The injured man jokes that if he'd known MC would get there this fast he would have asked for his shirt too, but MC has no idea who he is. The man says he likes his eyes, and asks if he's the one who sliced Zeke's cheek. By now, he's already known in the strike team as the boy who beat a high-level monster. Their captain seems excited to meet him, but Zeke cuts the chatter short. They're leaving. There's no reason to stay there longer. After Zeke's people and the others head out, Yu Jerryong walks to the door that had all that hostility behind it. The moment he steps inside, he finds the director. He looks mostly fine, which doesn't match how serious Zeke made it sound. But the director says the damage is serious. His body is wrecked, and so is his pride. He calls Zeke pathetic, then follows him anyway. Since Yu Jerryong isn't alone, the director asks for a small favor just in case. He asks if the protagonist has a lighter. If not, he should grab one from below. The director sounds tired, so MC does it. But when he looks down, he realizes everything underneath is already burning. At the same time, the director starts talking. If Zeke said they fought, that's not exactly true. The director was angry too, and had every intention of burning him. Then he adds that the muscular kid fights well. He's not even a tank, yet he held the line, and in 10 years he could become a great warrior. Yu Jerryong wants to ask more, but Zeke already knows where this is going. He wants to quit smuggling, and if it's to become a hunter, there's one condition. Within a month he has to master what the director teaches him. If he can't keep up, he should give up, because this path will be much harder and very different from what he knows. That leaves the protagonist stunned. The director really wants to teach him magic? The only thing Yu Jerryong has seen him do so far is rise into the air and smash things apart. So he asks the obvious question, why bring this up all of a sudden? Before he gets an answer, the director suddenly collapses into MC's arms. That's when he understands the man really is in bad shape. His body is cold, he's worn out, and he asks him to carry him. Then the story shifts to Songwoo, sitting down and talking about how hard it was at first to grind beans and make coffee by himself. But once he tried, it turned out easier than he expected, even with a few mistakes. If he'd known that sooner, he would have started long ago, and while working, he could have enjoyed it too. The other man told him not to say that anymore. It didn't sound like they were on the same side now. That man was Lim Yuan, 26 years old. Director Yu Sung confirmed it. Still, if they wanted to fix anything, they had to act. While Jerryong's father poured coffee, the director said they needed to catch that same Duganahi. There wasn't much else to do. Mark the targets, wipe them out, and collect the raid. But Yu Sung said he couldn't keep going. They both knew how bad his condition was, and they also knew he didn't have much time left. Trying to stay calm, Yu Xing handed his friend a cup of coffee, but he had clearly snapped some bastards were taking his partner away from him. He started crying, saying there had to be more than one Duganahi with them. Maybe he'd end up suffering through more pointless pain. But if that creature was still alive because that dragon was with them, the director would handle it himself. He'd gather a raid, hunt that monster down no matter what, and make the bastard fall at his feet. Right then, our young hero stepped out of one of the rooms, catching the director completely off guard. He didn't even know his friend had a son. And at that same moment, the young protagonist greeted Uncle Yun. Yun Sheng told the boy to go play while they talked. Once Jerryong left the room, Yu Sung went on and said Zeke had made him a painkiller formula, but it would slowly become addictive, and over time the pain would wear down his thinking, judgment, and memory. Even if he held out, in 3 or 4 years he might not even recognize the person standing in front of him. Yu Sung said he would do everything he could, but Yu Sung earnestly asked him to stop the headmaster. It felt like the first real favor he had ever asked. If anything happened to him, he wouldn't be able to raise this child, so he begged Yujerion to watch over him instead. The man known as the Dragon Slayer, who almost never showed weakness in his life, was now asking someone for help. He made that request so our hero could have a normal future. He wanted him to be truly happy, to live somewhere without adventurers, and he sincerely asked Yujerion to help. Yujerion couldn't turn him down, so he agreed. At that moment in the present, the director finally woke up. He asked what time it was. It wasn't too late, around 10:30. That meant he'd been out for about 3 hours. Even so, our hero brought him something he'd gotten at age 14, a gift from their time working together. It was a syringe, basically an emergency healing potion. The headmaster said it wasn't top grade, but it worked fast. As long as you weren't fatally hurt, it could get you back on your feet in a few hours. This was a rare backup item, valuable stuff for adventurers. Still, you can get one sometimes, so he told him to buy the next one with his own money. Then the director asked if he wanted to turn back. If he had changed his mind, he should say so now. The problem could still be solved, but once he started, there'd be no going back. And paying his father's hospital bills wasn't as impossible as it seemed. To him, letting a kid claim all the responsibility felt disgusting. But Juriong said that wasn't the point. He wasn't exactly fond of his father, and his father hadn't left any money. No one knew what could happen next. The director thought the boy just didn't trust him, but the protagonist was different. That wasn't it at all. He had always believed he needed the power to protect himself and his father with his own hands, no matter what happened. So he thanked him for the syringe, and said he'd save it for when he really needed it. Back in the present, we can see the director assumed our hero would treasure it, but he never imagined the boy still hadn't used it. Good thing he didn't sell it on the black market either. At that moment, the director figured our hero probably wouldn't believe him, but even if he never became a smuggler or even quit this line of work, he would still cover his father's bills. Jariong said he already knew that. He was completely sure that no matter what happened to him, the boss would never abandon his father. That certainty let him move forward without hesitation. The headmaster said that the moment he turned a 14-year-old boy into a tool, he had also betrayed his father. But MC was sure it wasn't the director who did that. It was his own choice. Even without help, he would have found some way. He had always wondered the same thing. If he could take care of himself, then why was the director helping him at all? Those thoughts had followed him his whole life. Then the headmaster stood up and said Yusung's only request had been that he not raise Jaryong to become an adventurer. But it wasn't that simple, because even in service he was never obedient. You couldn't bury a dragon slayer's son with talent tied to the abyss in an ordinary life. To be honest, the headmaster hated this world from the bottom of his heart. He hated the bastards who did this to his father, the fools who forgot him because they believed those freaks, and the ones who knew the truth but stood by and made excuses. Those are the people the director wants gone. Our hero started to stand, saying Zeke seemed kind of normal, but the director cut him off. Zeke would never catch Duganahi. His methods were too simple, and not only adventurers need to be ready when hunting a hidden dragon, because dragons are a plague. Even if you spot one, you can't just leave it alone, because pureblood dragons are built to cause huge destruction. So sure, maybe some of Zeke's squad are decent, but the rest of the freaks who abandoned his father definitely aren't. Even if the world ended tomorrow, the director would never forget what our hero lost, and he would never believe what he refused to believe. For now, he said, Zeke was held back by the law, but those bastards would still aid the dragons and drag him down. In the end, he'll pay for it. 20 years ago, his father destroyed that nightmare, but it came back. Lies replaced lies, and all those rotten idiots helped everything fall apart. That's why he never wanted him to become an adventurer. Then he handed our hero a sheet of paper and said it was the account number for 4 people. From the first day until now, all the money from his work had been sent there. Our hero had no idea what he meant, but the director said that from the start, this place was meant to be his someday, so he could open his own business when he grew up. Back then he planned to teach him skills and knowledge, things more practical and dangerous than what adventurers learn. He told him to call once he was done with the cast, and with them. After that, he didn't teach him magic in 1 month. For now, he told him to focus on the entrance exams, even if he thought they were pointless. As he moved to leave, our hero said he didn't have to offer him that chance. He thought the director might change his mind, and if he really didn't want him becoming an adventurer, the director stopped and said that was true, but those were only his feelings, and they didn't matter much. 3 years ago, just like now, the only thing that mattered was what our protagonist wanted to do. Somewhere else in Old Yongsan, there was that same girl involved in the city incident. She said they always ended up gathering like this, and then wondered if it was time to get a place of their own. Got money? She asked. Still, not even half of them showed up to meetings like this. But if they had a place, they could at least swap out that warm shower. It was obvious these two knew each other well. They kept joking around, acting like no one else was nearby. The girl teased him, saying people thought that without a Perkin he'd whine like a lost puppy, or hold back tears while pretending to look tough. That really got under his skin, which was probably exactly what she wanted. He was already starting to look ridiculous. He got so mad his aura started leaking out, and he snapped that they really thought he'd be punished for fighting her. You could call that suicide, but the girl was ready to throw down too. Then a man stepped in and told them to stop. Even he wasn't going to interfere, but he wanted everyone to remember they were there because of one body, and even if he didn't like the idea, he wasn't going to handle it alone just because they wanted to fight. Then he raised his hands and admitted he had acted dumb and proud, only answering that crazy Dorlin. But the girl shot back that he only survived because someone was there, and for some reason that person didn't answer the phone at all yesterday. So what if that's true, he said. In that situation, there wasn't really any need. Why should he listen to more info when something might come back and kill all the rescuers anyway? The operation had succeeded, and he didn't need extra risk. The tough guy said successful wasn't exactly the right word, because 12 people still died. Even that didn't get proper attention. For 4 straight days the news only talked about those boys, or rather, our heroes, and not a word about the stolen trucks they managed to take. The leader said that made sense. Without those two, the Hunter Association never would have avoided a full disaster. Their security for transporting 5-star monsters was a mess, and regular people died because of it. So the media got pushed toward the 2 boys in the car, and the victims' families were used to help cover the association's mistake. The girl snapped that she could have just killed all of them, but the leader warned that would only get her labeled a terrorist. Then people would stop talking about the association's failure and focus on chasing criminals instead. He added that if they fail again, everything will collapse. The big guy muttered that maybe that's why accidents keep happening. They still had another job to handle today. Then one more member showed up. He dragged a man in on a chain, calling it his little hobby. They had caught a hunter who'd been hiding something from his own team. He acted like a hero in public, but last night he was caught trying to sell off a trophy through shady channels. His name was Ogong Hayek, ranked 97th, and a lot of people saw him as dangerous. Even as the youngest on his squad, he was selling out his own side and moving loot in secret. The name meant nothing to some of them, so one explained it was a hidden hunter base near a dungeon, a safe room stocked with gear, items and a place to rest where monsters can't get in. That's what those bases are for, but not everyone uses them that way. When told to repeat himself, the captive said there'd be a party there in secret, with his team leader, other teammates, and even civilians. The big guy cut in, asking if they were planning to kill him. Shaking, the hunter kept talking. He said friends of their group bring guests in, and the lineup changes every time. Usually it's rich thrill seekers, businessmen, celebrities, people who drink and use relaxing potions. The girl thought that sounded wild, but the boss saw it for what it was. People bored with normal pleasures, looking for bigger thrills inside dungeons, where hunters guard them and no outsiders can see. The chained hunter insisted he had no choice. The first time he went, they told him everyone did it, and he wasn't the only one involved. The man holding the chain stepped closer and told him to stop shaking if he still had the guts to tell the truth. Maybe it wasn't too late. But if he'd hurt people there again, then the boss was sorry, he'd have to die. Their plan was to leave no one alive in that place. Corrupt hunters and civilians abusing dungeon attacks for fun. A headline like that would shock the whole world. Still, some were shocked the boss wouldn't join them, even though the mission sounded simple. After all, their targets were just the famous hunter squad, 2 of the golden elite, and 6 rankers. He said those enemies would be strong enough to burn off all their stress. Then he told them to cut loose and kill as many as they wanted, so when the bodies were found, everyone would see their world wasn't safe at all, because soon it would be time for Squad Scar. A month later, Juri-Yong was driving in when he thought about how much had happened lately, even though his body still hadn't fully recovered. By then, he had reached the place where the elf girl was waiting. She reminded him that this was his last free weekend before the exam, even though he'd said he would train here with his headmaster. She was about to say she'd get ready too, but then another passenger appeared. Jungkook, the guy Juri-Young had met at the hospital that morning. He stepped out from behind the car. Since they were already talking, he said he wanted to help too. Sharing what they knew would be useful, especially since they'd be in the same class. Jungkook looked excited, though also a little intense. They all needed to understand this place had a full training hall, a pool, rest area, free food and drinks, and even a gym with special machines made for hunters. Sarnuam added that the dorm rooms were on the 5th floor, and every room had its own shower. If that wasn't enough, there was even a spa on the 4th floor. Juri-Young was stunned that all of this belonged to her uncle, but she told him not to make a big deal out of it. Some high-rank hunters have bought whole mountains to build training grounds. Her uncle just comes here with coworkers to train, and on other days they can use the place freely. Then Suri-Young asked why Jungkook was here at all. He said it was rude to talk about a classmate like that, but Satline fired back that she didn't know what he'd told him to make him come, and she doubted Jungkook saw him as a classmate anyway. Juri-Young asked if she ever even talked to him normally. She said it wasn't just her. In fact, she'd bet no one in their class, maybe even their whole department, really talks to him. Everyone knows he thinks too highly of himself, and if he ignores top students, he'd ignore the rest even more. Right then, the protagonist simply asked Jungkook why he was still standing off by himself. They didn't come here to hang around, so the big guy finally ran over to them. MC said he'd check out all the equipment later, but Jungkook admitted he mostly came because he wanted to try gear from a new brand. While they talked, Juri-Young was surprised that Jungkook had actually shown up, just like Saram, but he didn't see any problem with it. If they had issues with each other, they could just say it. Jungkook said he didn't really have any kind of relationship with the other kids at school. It was just that Saram was a little scary, but also really cool. He had to ask if he was seriously talking about that same Saram. Jungkook said yes. He explained that she was sharp, and from first year on, plenty of people didn't like her, but she never bent for anyone, and always held her head high. He didn't even care much about grades, he just thought she was strong and steady. So once Jungkook was standing beside Sarome, Jae-young suggested the three of them train together this weekend. Sarome said the protagonist needed to prepare for the practical test, but he answered that it didn't sound that hard. It was mostly memorizing and analyzing, not really skill use or hands-on practice. Even she had said the key was just proper analysis. All the examples they'd seen so far were simple, and they already knew the exam site, topic, and the rest. He said that didn't mean the test was unimportant, but since the three of them were already here, they could get a lot more out of training together than he and Sarome could alone. Over the last month, he'd run into strong people more times than ever before. He'd learned things he never would have figured out by himself, and he wanted to train with them for real. That way they could share what each of them knew best and judge each other's level, which would help all three of them. Of course, Jae-young awkwardly ended it by calling them outcasts, even though he really didn't need to say that. Then he added that if he got into the hero school and made new friends, he'd want to share what he knew with them too. He wasn't sure how things worked now, but he figured the other students probably did the same. Sarome admitted she'd never really thought about it. For a moment, all three of them felt the hero school might be a place where they could gain not just experience, but real friends too. MC said he'd probably enter their school, and even if Sarome stayed a second year, it could still help her if she wanted to keep learning and training. Xiaoram said she got what he meant, but she didn't think she had anything she could really teach the two of them. Jae-young pointed out one thing they both still couldn't do well: use magic. She could, even if combining it smoothly with other actions was still hard. Xiaoram tried to brush it off, saying she was just a good archer, not someone great at magic. Zhongbao made a serious face and said that if that was true, then he definitely wanted to learn from her. He planned to master it someday anyway. Seiram was left speechless. While Jungkook thought she had handled it perfectly, it had sounded natural to him. 15 minutes later, in the fight room, Jungkook said he needed to call his parents, and Jae-young was still amazed that this room had basically everything. There were even clothes in every size. He joked that he wanted to take a suit home, but Seiram asked if he was doing all this on purpose, taking care of both her and Seiram too. She thanked him and said training together really meant a lot. She never thought she'd make friends besides him and Si Hongwoo. The protagonist told her she'd already figured out he wasn't that bad, and he wanted to say one more thing, but they got cut off when Anisha showed up, saying she had a bad feeling. She'd been on her way to the gym, and the second she saw Si Hongwoo, she understood why. Si Hong was stunned and asked why Anisha was there at all, but Anisha explained that her uncle wasn't around today. After what he said last time, she knew they could come when no one else was there. That made Seiram pause. Was there something going on she didn't know? Was Anisha that close to him? Then Seiram introduced Jae-young to Anisha, saying Anisha was her cousin. People call her Ani, but they're the same age. Anisha waved, surprised Seiram had brought a friend, and said she was happy for her. She also introduced a sophomore from their school, Jang, explaining she'd invited some upperclassmen for the weekend. They wanted to talk and train together. Only the ones with free time came, and she said it was even better with MC here too. Anisha added that Seiram doesn't like big groups, so she probably wanted to leave. If this happened tomorrow in front of everyone, people might think they were pushing her out. Seiram tried to object, but Anisha told her not to be stubborn. Since it was safe, she should join them. This was a good chance for her. Then Jae-young spoke up and said they'd all be shooting together anyway. Another friend had come too, but he was still on the phone so they could meet him soon. One of the sophomores looked at him and said he hadn't seen him before, asking who he was. The protagonist explained that he didn't go to a special school, just a regular one. He was a first year and planned to transfer to the hero school this year. He added that Seiram was helping him prepare for the entrance exam. He'd been focused on something else for a long time, so he was still behind, but he'd work hard. That made everyone laugh and mock him. Jae-young was about to suggest they train together, but the sophomore cut him off and told him to get in a car and go home before it got dark. Anisha's group piled on, saying they didn't care whether his story about transferring later was true or not. They claimed he was just embarrassed about going to a normal school, so he made up that whole story. Since they were hero school students, they said an average kid couldn't keep up with him. If he stayed around, he'd only embarrass himself and end up disappointed. He should go find tutors at his own level. MC tried to answer, but suddenly a strike came at his face. The hit landed hard, and Jae-young cried out that it hurt. Everyone knew Jang wasn't actually trying to kill him. Even unofficial hunters can't just beat up normal people outside dungeons. That's still a crime. He only meant to throw a threatening punch, scare him and show the gap between them. But even Jang looked confused that he'd really hit him, since he'd kept his distance. It made no sense. With a normal reaction, Jae-young should have leaned back. Instead, he moved into it. Now he was acting hurt, mumbling that he only wanted to be friends, and got punched for it. Then he said there was no helping it. He'd have to defend himself now, glaring at him like a threat. The training area had surveillance cameras, and they recorded everything from multiple angles. Hunters used those videos to study and improve their movements. Seiram realized Jae-young had taken that hit on purpose. She didn't know why, but now he had proof. The footage would clearly show Jung struck first. Jung had no idea what kind of protection the protagonist meant, so MC started playing it up, saying he was a sensitive, quiet person who bottles things up, gets depressed and can't sleep when something bad happens. Jung snapped back that it was just a light hit, so why make such a big deal? Pointing right at him, Jaryong said that wasn't an apology. Jung hit him out of nowhere, so should he call the police or go straight to the headmaster? Jang tried to calm things down and asked what he wanted. Money, or did he really want to train with them? He said he'd already made it clear. Unless he gave back the same amount of damage he took, he wouldn't be able to sleep at night. Jang told him to go ahead and hit him, sure that a boy like the protagonist couldn't do much. In his mind, Jaryong was just a regular student who could only throw basic punches. But the moment MC raised his hand, Jang suddenly pictured what would happen next and imagined all his teeth getting knocked out. So the only thing he could do was jump away. He acted confused and said that wasn't the deal. The others also thought Jang should have just taken the hit. Sure, hero school students would normally dodge Jaryong just to mess with him, but this time, Jang backed off without thinking, because what he saw wasn't a weak kid. It felt like a monster giving off insane pressure. Seeing that, Anisha said, backing away wasn't enough anymore. The right move was to apologize properly and pay compensation, or this would just be a beating. Jang quickly said he could apologize and admit he'd acted dumb, but Jaryong told him to choose sparring or a real fight. That's when Jang knew something was wrong. The protagonist shot up from his seat so fast that Jang cursed and yelled. They'd see who was pathetic, but MC was already right beside him. He moved so fast it looked like there were two of him, and Jang swung at the fake one. A second later, Jaryong's fist smashed into his nose. He hadn't even used full power, then asked if they were done already. That was more than enough to crush Jang's pride. He lost his temper right there and started throwing hit after hit, but none of them connected. Then Jaryong stepped in close and mocked him for not handling even a few punches, before kicking him down to the floor. At first everyone thought Jang was pretending to struggle to lure him in, but then they realized he was seriously getting overwhelmed. Was he really a hero school student? Jaryong only said that compared to the people he'd fought before, this felt completely different. He reminded them he'd wanted to talk it out without fighting, but nobody cared. Then he thanked Jang for the match, said he'd taken plenty of damage, and even held out a hand to help him up, but Jang just looked away. The protagonist kept going, saying a sophomore should have been stronger than this. If he'd known it would be this easy, he could have ignored him. Then he asked for the camera footage. Xiaobei couldn't figure out what else he was planning to do to annoy Jang, but it was obvious the video would show Jaryong had held back and slowed himself down. Xiaobei was stunned. Had he really planned all this from the start, just to get a recording? Jang had been targeting MC the second he walked in, and the girl in the dress was the one who brought those students here. She wasn't even trying to hide how much she hated Sairam. After a short pause, Jaryong went on. He said he didn't know what school life was like for them, but from what Seonbo told him, this kind of time mattered a lot. Honestly, he'd expected them to at least pretend to be decent. He admitted his self-esteem wasn't great, but he wasn't about to sit there and take mockery from jerks like them. This might be nothing to them, but to him, this part of his life mattered a lot. He truly believed they'd all grow faster together. Then, while they were still talking, they noticed that same sophomore running after them from behind. All he could do was yell. Right then, Anisha pinned him in place with magic. She said she didn't bring him in because he was strong. She expected him to do better here. Instead, he embarrassed himself in front of everyone. That made it clear to the group that Anisha had stepped in herself. He tried saving his energy to unleash it all at once, but it still changed nothing. Sarum only noticed one odd thing. He kept staring at his hand. When they asked why, Jaryong realized the feeling was the same as during the fight with the horned horror. Then we jump back 3 weeks. He was unpacking a box with his old gear, and up close most of it looked wrecked. Killblood was the worst of all. It barely seemed usable anymore. Its power was simple. If the user's life was in danger, the spell would trigger. That was when he remembered the pendant in his pocket, activating. It may be the reason he landed safely, but that burst of power still bothered him. Was it another effect of Killblood? It couldn't just be some hidden power inside him, suddenly waking up. After all, the item in his hands was worth around 22 billion, something that costly should have more than one ability. Only then did he really grasp how insane that price was. From there, we returned to the moment the magic went off. He looked at his hands and knew he hadn't imagined it. The feeling was exactly the same as back then, but why now? Maybe it wasn't the artifact after all, because the moment Anisha switched topics and said he should be helping her, not Sarum, since Sarum had probably just paid him enough to stay. She even claimed that whatever Sarum offered, others would pay 3 times more and cover the extra costs too. Sarum shouted that it was nonsense, but Anisha cut her off and called it a perfectly reasonable offer. She pointed out that Jaryong had already beaten one of their high school students. What stood out to her was that he acted like he couldn't enter the school and didn't even call out her name. She figured there had to be a reason he couldn't focus on the entrance exam, but that kind of problem could be fixed with money. To Anisha, that was Sarum's only real value. Then she went too far, saying Sarum had no talent, no kindness, no reputation, nothing at all. Jarum just smiled and said he couldn't agree with that. At least Sarum had endurance. He also said he understood Anisha well enough. Someone this bitter would even lash out at her own sister. Anisha snapped completely and blasted a huge wave of magic at him that barely missed. She then announced that all classes were cancelled for the week. When the other high schoolers saw their weak sophomore go this far, they decided there was no point protecting him as some kind of leader. In the end, they had only come to build connections anyway. Anisha said the time was wasted, but not enough to matter, and suggested they all act like none of this happened. Then she warned Jae-young that if he wasn't after her sister's money, he should watch himself starting next week, because this could affect his school life. He was about to answer, but Sarom stopped him, and he asked what kind of magic Anisha had used. Sarom admitted Anisha had probably staged all of this to learn more about him, because there was no way Anisha ever truly thought well of her before. Now she was obsessed with anything connected to Sarom. After learning about Jae-young, she clearly wanted to mess with their relationship. She'd probably try to pull him away from the entrance exam group next, and that thought alone gave everyone chills. The protagonist, though, wasn't focused on that. He cared more about the strength that vanished the instant Anisha released all her power. He finally understood that back then, it wasn't some power to kill the unkillable. It was strength awakened by the spell itself, a response to danger. Sae-rom looked at him and asked if he was okay, since he seemed older than usual. Jae-young lowered his fist and said he was fine. More than anything, he needed to learn magic fast. By then, the sophomore had come to, and the first thing he saw was Gae-yoon standing there like nothing had happened, which only scared him more. He had no idea why Gae-yoon was there, but Maemos walked over and apologized. He said he thought the guy could take one punch, but didn't expect him to get humiliated that badly in front of everyone. The sophomore said he deserved it. If anyone here was a jerk, it was him, because he had acted up in front of someone tied to the district tragedy, and still dared to be rude. He said he should be thankful just to be alive. That answer made Jae-young think. He hadn't expected such a harsh result, especially since he wasn't even fighting seriously. The sophomore was stunned, and he explained that his movement speed wasn't much above the basics. He also lost control of his emotions, and fought angry, which made the match boring and easy to read. The protagonist had picked up on several habits. Curious now, the sophomore asked what he meant. The protagonist said he'd already checked the camera footage while they were outside, and gave specifics. Pay more attention to your center of gravity before moving your arms, and lean your body toward the foot you step with first. He had even typed it all into his phone. Sae-rom knew the high schooler had to be in total shock, because Jae-young clearly wasn't asking for money. He was just giving real advice. To her, it made sense. MC likes hearing honest criticism from seniors, but the sophomore still couldn't believe it. A minute ago, he'd tried to hit him from behind, and now he was helping him improve. The protagonist said it didn't matter. The guy had already paid enough for his mistake, and there were no hard feelings. They were all here to train, so splitting up now would just be a waste. He offered to make himself useful, and told them to save his phone number so he could send the video. After Cholgon left with Jae-young, he muttered that those high schoolers were trash for running off and leaving their friend behind. That had to hurt. Then the two of them met up with Sae-rom, and she said there was still plenty to do. They needed to start spell theory. She explained it by comparing magic to fuel. Spells run on it, and the quality of that fuel changes the result. Maemos asked what she meant, so Gae-yoon tried to explain it another way, and Sae-rom said she'd touched on this before. Even if you stack up a bunch of newspapers, it can still lose to one bright ember, because everyone can only handle a certain amount of magic. Then she said her own magic rank was C. In the mage system, that was pretty high, enough to hit enemies hard or boost allies. She added that learning to strengthen themselves in battle would help them a lot. That got Jae-young excited. He realized his abilities might improve a lot, and if it worked anything like Killblood, it would be huge. He even asked if they could master it in a week. Sae-rom gave him a look and said no beginner was learning that in 3 days and 2 nights. She'd been using magic for a long time herself, so she knew this much for sure. Just understanding the basics took at least 2 weeks, and boosting strength was only the smallest part of what they had to learn. Then the high school student got up and offered to help, if Jae-young was okay learning from a jerk like him. After all, self-enhancement was his specialty this year. By evening, he finally managed to cast the lowest rank spell, Fire Sprout. He was shocked. The high schooler told him not to get too excited. If it didn't burn at all, that would be the weird part. Almost anyone could force that spell out even without proper skill. Jae-young asked if he should make the fire bigger, or mix in water, but the sophomore told him to keep the spark going, and focus inward. First he had to feel the magic itself. The protagonist didn't get how he was supposed to feel something he'd never felt before. The high schooler told him it wasn't really new. Even if MC didn't call it magic, he'd been using magic power already without noticing. The energy in his body was active right now, which made this the best chance to sense it. As soon as Jae-young closed his eyes, the sophomore told him to focus on the feeling, and not let it slip away. If he sensed anything at all, that meant he'd taken the first step. While he tried to feel everything around him, the sophomore could only think that he never expected someone like the protagonist to have no basics at all, and hoped this wouldn't take the whole weekend. Then MC said he felt a tickling, tingling sensation like he was just starting to sense the world around him. A jolt runs through him and the upperclassman is shocked, because Jae-young felt magic in under a minute, but he just keeps saying how incredible it is. He can sense around 100 paths inside his body. There are 2 parts tied to magic, the core near the navel, which makes mana, and the mana chains that carry it. There are 127 in total. While they talk, Sae-rom asks Jungkook if he plays any instrument, because that would make this easier to get. Using magic is like playing and writing music on a piano. Jungkook looks confused, so Sae-rom forms a D-rank spell, Thunder Fist, in her hand. She explains that she didn't chant or make hand signs, because magic usually isn't flashy. Most of it happens inside the body, even when the body stays still. With a piano, You press keys in the right order and timing, and music comes out. Magic works the same way. Think of the mana chains as piano keys, and a spell as a song made by pressing them. Out of 127 chains, sending mana through specific ones in the right order and at the right time, that's what magic is. Jungkook thinks it over, then asks what happens if the order is wrong. Are there side effects? Sairom says simple spells might still work if the mistake is small, but the stronger and more complex the spell, the more dangerous even a tiny error becomes. Even with Thunderfist, a few mistakes can leave you shocked and unable to move for half a day. And with higher rank spells, a mistake can kill you. That's why fighters protect the backline. Mages need focus, and that's hard in a real battle. Jungkook admits he's been trying to feel his magic in his spare time, but he still can't sense each chain on its own, so Sarum eagerly starts explaining again. Jaryong watches her and realizes she's really talkative when it's something she knows well. Then he stands up and the upperclassman thinks he's leaving, but the protagonist says he doesn't think he needs to keep going. The older student has no idea what he means. He says MC needs to keep practicing with Fire Sprout until sensing mana feels natural. MC answers that it already does. He can't count every chain yet, but he can feel where they are. The upper-class man doesn't buy it, so Jaryong starts listing them, 2 ending at the fingers on the right, 1 at the wrist, 3 more at the elbow, 6 in the right arm. The left has even more, 10. The upper-class man is stunned. A guy who knew nothing, just moments ago, can already feel them this clearly. He insists he's not lying. He only wants to know what comes next. He doesn't even know what to call the guy. They don't go to the same school after all. Still, for humans, the number and rough positions of the chains are mostly the same, so each one is numbered from 1 to 1. 27. At that point, the upper-class man decides to show how the chains work. First he throws a normal punch, then starts to draw on his chains, using the E-rank spell Muscle Breakthrough, and tells Jaryong to feel the difference himself. Then the upper-class man punches straight at the protagonist's face, and even MC can tell the speed and power jumped way up. A normal person would end up with more than a broken nose. The upper-class man is amused that he doesn't even flinch after taking a hit like that. He says that back in first year, he was near the bottom of his class, so he at least built confidence in his basic body. Still, he figured out he lacked talent in the usual areas, so he started looking for another way. Instead of chasing gifts he didn't have, he worked with what he did. His magic talent wasn't bad, so he hunted for spells he could actually learn and use. That's how he got into buffs. They surprised him because depending on how you mix them, the result can be way more than simple addition. Jaryong realizes the punch from earlier wasn't boosted by just one spell. Several buffs were working together. Looking at his hand, the upper-class man says that's the thing. Talented people don't bother with buffs. At worst, they need 2 or 3. He needs dozens. Even so, by second year his grades climbed to average, and he even led his team. But the top students still look down on him, like he's cheating. That's probably why he was so excited today, when one of the best first years asked to train with him. Even if she only approached him to get closer to the others, he was still happy. He wanted to share his ideas and be acknowledged, even if it made him look like some show-off jerk. When someone gets ignored all the time, what they want most is attention. Then he notices how late it's gotten and starts to leave, apologizing. He tries to apologize again, but Jaryong tells him to stop. If Tom is really in trouble, they still have 58 hours, and he's already looking forward to the next lesson in the morning. By Monday, everyone is already gathered, talking about how good the morning air feels after training. None of them expected to spend the whole weekend training instead of sleeping, so basically, they didn't sleep at all. Still, no one looks tired except Setium, since both Jaryong and Jungkook have A-rank stamina. Setium says she never knew group training could help this much. If they were in the center, she wouldn't lose to Kakopapa right now. The upper-class man says he called a taxi and asks if anyone needs to go toward Gangnam. He has school practice today, so he's heading that way. The protagonist raises his hand and asks to be dropped off at any station on line 2, so they decide to ride together. On a weekday morning, the roads are packed anyway. A little awkwardly, the upperclassman says this weekend meant a lot to him too. It was probably his best weekend since he was 5. He doesn't know if they'll meet again before the exam, since he'll be busy all month while everyone studies, so he tells them to do their best, especially Sairam. If she fails the final exam, it'd be seriously embarrassing. Sairam turns bright red, clearly knowing that already. He also speaks to Jungkook, asking the two of them to act like they know each other. Then he heads to the car and says goodbye to everyone. Jungkook and Sairam are still awkward with each other while they wait. As it gets brighter, Jaryong says he's glad they made it without traffic. He adds that this was the best weekend he's had, and thanks to the upperclassmen, he learned a ton new ideas, key points, and that special technique. After thinking for a moment, the older student says it's only a theory. He's never seen it used, and hasn't done it himself, so maybe it's nonsense. Maybe it's just MC's imagination, but he feels like it could work. If it does, Jaryong says he could use it to communicate. The upperclassman asks what he means, but he says that's a long story. If it works, he'll tell him the results. He even suggests they grab lunch sometime. The upperclassman agrees, but only if the protagonist gets in, because he doesn't have time for a guy at a regular school. MC appreciates that, and they part ways. When he gets home, he says he's exhausted and still has to go to school, but the headmaster cuts him off at once. Standing in the middle of the room, he says Jaryong won't even have time to sleep. The protagonist asks about school, but the headmaster says there's no point going, because he's already getting ready to transfer to the War Academy. Perfect attendance won't earn extra points on the entrance exam, so he tells MC to pack his things. Then he notices the MC has learned magic, basic but active. Jaerum says if you already know what's on the lesson, it's better to prepare ahead, but the headmaster tells him he's both right and wrong. He doesn't get it, so the headmaster says not to take it the wrong way. He isn't saying he messed up, only that these weren't private lessons. This wasn't a lesson, it was a test to see if he was truly ready, and if he really wanted to live like an adventurer. That's what the director meant to find out. He wanted to test him all the way, because one thing was already clear, the protagonist wasn't as gifted as he first believed. For a moment, the director looked dead serious, then his face eased up again. He reminded Jaryong that he had brought a few supplies, and if they ran out, he'd replace them on the way. MC asked where they were headed. He wondered if it was the same training ground the director used back in his active days, but the director said he'd sold that place a long time ago. Even while saying it, he fumbled with a lid and couldn't get it open. He asked what he was doing there, and the director replied that it was for him. Once the lid finally opened, Jaryong saw his new weapon. The color looked a little different, but more importantly, it was smaller and fit his hand much better. The director then told him to get moving, because if he cared that much about weapons, he'd get plenty of time to try it out. The protagonist was excited for that, until that excitement dropped into panic when a carnivorous ant appeared, a monster ranked at 4 stars. He kept hearing the same warning in his head: against a 3-star monster, run if you can, and anything 4 stars or above was something you should never face at all. That was what he'd been taught. The director said that might be true for smugglers, not adventurers, because if Jaryong was too scared to move, he should just say so and he'd save him right away. Even so, the headmaster was thinking back to what he'd seen half a year ago. He knew MC's skill with his own eyes, but carnivorous ants were especially deadly for close-range fighters, so if Jaryong hadn't improved since then, he'd probably die. The moment the director finished speaking, the ant attacked, and it moved so fast that even with full focus he still got hurt. This was only his second time fighting a monster at 4 stars or higher, and this one was very different from the last monster he'd faced. Still, the rule was the same. Whether attacking or blocking, he couldn't afford one mistake. Without backup, one slip meant death, so he had to use everything he had to end it fast. He struck twice and then got behind it, ready to land another blow. The biggest gap between a 4-star and a 3-star monster is intelligence. That changes by individual and by species, but many monsters can handle situations almost like humans. Some even mess with you on purpose. So just as Jaryong moved in, the ant turned its head into a shield to block the hit. The protagonist realized a needle-like strike wouldn't break through, and the headmaster figured he was done for. He was about to use magic himself, but then Jaryong stepped in and split the ant clean in half with his new staff. It was far stronger than expected. When he landed, he could hardly believe the ant had vanished, and the headmaster was stunned that he'd activated the staff without even knowing how it worked. The director asked how he felt. Weak, dizzy, drained? MC answered that he was breathing hard but not really tired, just surprised. Lighting a cigarette, the director realized he couldn't sense any magic power at all, which meant the weapon formed its blade by using stamina instead of mana. The system itself wasn't special, actually it was pretty old, but that kind of feature always has a cost, and the stamina drain from the blade should have been much worse. Yet that strike only left him a little winded, which was amazing. The director said he was lucky. If not for his bad lungs, he might have missed a very important lesson. Our hero admitted he definitely would have lost. He knew he should have lost, even if he didn't think his ability was bad, because honestly his skills were solid. In terms of pure combat strength, he was probably around the level of a gold rank adventurer. That made Jaryong blush, but the director cut him off. He asked if being called good was really praise. He knew 10 talented people, including his father, and more than half of them died to monsters weaker than they were. Right then, another ant appeared and rushed at him. He realized it was the same one he'd just cut down, because it had super regeneration and could fully heal in almost no time. As Jaryong moved to attack, he noticed his staff had changed into a hammer. The director saw that his stance, his swing, and even the space around him let the weapon pick the best shape on its own. That might sound small, but for someone like Jaryong, it was the perfect feature. Still, no matter how good the weapon was, if he didn't pick the right plan, he would lose, and he didn't have much time. After a while, Jaryong was already covered in injuries. He was out of strength, and just as the ant moved in to finish him, the director stepped in, raised a shield, and lit another cigarette. He asked the protagonist what exactly he'd been trying to do, because he couldn't even avoid the attacks, let alone defend himself. MC answered that he thought he'd destroyed every weak point, so what else was left? The director said the answer was simple: run. Jaryong hated that. He wanted to win, but the director repeated that he shouldn't just run anywhere, he had to lead it somewhere. Its regeneration would stop working. That was how he'd win. At that point, his eyes changed. He finally understood that the battlefield had to change. There were 3 ways to fight a carnivorous tree, and the best one was to lure it into a trap where it couldn't absorb nutrients, since that's what keeps its body regenerating. The headmaster said that if Jaryong had dragged it into rocky ground or old ruins, he would have beaten it 5 times over already, but he never even considered that. All the protagonist knew was to find a weak spot, aim, and hit harder. He had no other method. While the headmaster explained, MC pointed out something he should have noticed. The carnivorous tree could already break through barriers. The headmaster admitted defense wasn't his strong point, so against a tree like that, he used the second strategy: burn the whole body with C-rank fire magic or stronger. That, the director said, is why the carnivorous tree is a 4-star monster. It's dangerous, but it has a clear weakness: fire. If you can't use fire though, then stick with the first method. The carnivorous tree isn't that hard, once you know how to fight it. But before people figured that out, it was a nightmare for melee adventurers. Anyone could guess that fire magic could kill it, but the first method was even easier than that. Back then, people didn't have easy access to tools like military fire grenades. The first generation didn't even have proper attack spells, so adventurers paid with their lives to create those strategies. Those were the talented people the director had been talking about, the ones who died to monsters that later turned out to be simple to beat. Then he looked at him and brought the talk back, asking what it felt like the first time a monster beat him. He stared at the ground and said it felt awful. Losing to a monster was nothing like losing to a person. It was ugly and humiliating. The regret, the emptiness, the feeling that you'd learned nothing at all. Every adventurer goes through that at least once, along with the cost that comes with it. If you're lucky, you walk away shaken. If not, someone dies, and sometimes you're left blaming yourself for living when your partner didn't. The director stood over Jaryong and said he wasn't trying to dump all that guilt on him. He just wanted him to understand that turning someone into an adventurer can cost too much, and more training doesn't always fix that. Then, right after finishing that speech, he handed the protagonist a bag and told him to start running for hours, because a dungeon's inside is never the same size as the space it takes up outside. From the outside, they all look similar, and distance feels normal, but the real space inside can be massive. The Icarus jungle, for example, covers 4 districts of Seoul and Yedo Island on the outside, yet inside, it's as large as the whole Korean peninsula. Soon, the two of them arrived, and the director told Jaryong to look back and take it in for a second. They had entered the dungeon once called Syndrome, Danger Level A, but he warned him not to relax, just because it looked nice. Even the lowest creatures there were 3-star threats, and MC normally wouldn't last. For the next 2 weeks, the director would train him day and night, and after that, the daytime training would keep going. But without that, he can still make it through the night. If he uses everything he learned, he should last a month, which is exactly how long he has until the exam. All Jaryong could say was that he was sorry they only had 1 month. That month flew by, and soon it was November, the day of the Warrior Academy transfer test. Sarum was really nervous because he hadn't replied for an entire month, and the exam started at 9. She wondered if he was really not coming. Then her phone rang. It was him, so she turned at once, and immediately felt that something was off. Jaryong apologized for ignoring her messages. He said he'd been somewhere with no signal for a whole month, and hadn't even told her before he left. What really shook her, though, was how strange he looked. Even if the apology came late, he still asked her to forgive him for making her worry, and said he'd go wash up then come back. Sarum reached out to stop him, but the second her hand touched his back, she felt a huge danger, and then it vanished. Jaryong quickly apologized again. He said it was just a habit now to react when something came at him from behind, but she told him not to worry about it. She understood. Once they got into the car, the protagonist explained everything. He said he really liked the new weapon, and had rushed over without even bringing his things, though he still seemed a little uneasy. For Sashram, this was the first time she had ever felt an aura like that from a person, and that was the real reason she got scared. The energy coming from him felt oddly familiar. For a split second, it felt like the aura of a monster was coming from Jaryong. Once they were in the car, he added that the new clothes fit him perfectly, and felt almost weightless. Sairam said if they had more time, they could test all the functions and fine-tune the details, since better gear comes with more features. But MC was only focused on the exam. Sairam told him that was better than sitting around and getting nervous, but he still shouldn't let his guard down, even if it was only an exam. Jaryong said he wasn't excited about the test itself. What he really wanted to see was the hero school, because Sairam had talked about it for months, but he had never visited it himself. The school was in Seoul, near Namsan Mountain, about 270 meters above sea level. That area used to be a park, but the mountain later changed into one of the highest mountain regions in all of Korea, because it bordered the huge dungeon Igar Jungle. In truth, it became its own separate dungeon, and because of that, 30 years earlier, the government worked with the Hunter Association and made a plan to clear it. They gathered every hunter they could, held a briefing, and not one of them refused, even though joining was voluntary. Getting ready for that massive raid took about a year. They even brought in astronomers and physicists, and in the end, an announcement was made that Mount Drabik, formerly Mount Namsan, had been cleared. People celebrated because fully clearing a dungeon above A rank by world standards was a huge achievement. But once the excitement settled, Koreans started thinking about something else. Mount Drabik had more than one peak, and the whole range was large. The question became how to use that land, until one comment suddenly ended the whole argument. Yu Sung suggested building a school there. Hunters had long needed a real training academy, but creating a place that could properly teach a large number of gifted people was never easy, so the idea kept getting delayed. Back then, the dungeon had no owner, but the true right to it belonged to the hunters, who risked their lives to clear it. Very few people knew that then, or now. If the hunter who contributed the most had kept that right instead of giving up his claim, the hero school wouldn't exist today. And of course, that hunter was Yu Sung. Jirayung said that even if he never studied there, he had always wanted to visit at least once. He joked that if they sold souvenirs they'd make a fortune. Then he asked why they were leaving Seoul when the school wasn't in the north. Jirayung let out a breath and said a lot had happened while he was gone. Had he ever heard of Jace and why? If not, they were a famous dungeon clearing team. Some of his friends were even fans, but they all died after the lock broke and their shelter failed, apparently while a high-danger monster was nearby. It sounded awful, but at the scene, they found medicine and the bodies of well-known people. Jaryong guessed that it had caused a huge scandal, and Saeram said he was right. Public apologies started everywhere, even from the Hunter Association. Trust in every major group dropped hard, and she admitted that before meeting him she probably would have blamed the Hunters too. So to calm the public, the Hunter Association announced a bunch of new projects. The changed exam site was one of them. That led the protagonist to ask about the Fang Maze. Samirom explained that it was the second dungeon ever fully cleared after Drabik Mountain, another place ranked above A. A long time ago, the famous dragon Wazuka lived there. Right then, deep in the Jensen Group Lab's underground forge, Zeke grumbled that he had barely managed to bring a few barrels and asked if their blacksmith really drank that much in so little time. The blacksmith snapped back that Zeke shouldn't complain. He hadn't had real wine in ages, and this much wouldn't even reach his liver. Zeke still told him not to drink at all. It was honey wine, a very strong dwarven drink, aged for 25 years. The blacksmith said that even the elf folk couldn't handle it properly, so there was no need to explain how special it was. Then he asked why Zeke had come down there. Was it news about Jiraichung? Zeke said not exactly. He wanted to ask about the Wazuka Maze, since the association had contacted the blacksmith about it around 20 years ago. The blacksmith said they wanted to turn it into a harsh training ground. He told them the idea was nonsense, and they kicked him out. Zeke asked why he had opposed it so strongly, but the blacksmith just poured another barrel and said elves should understand this better than anyone. Dragons get obsessed with things. What they crave can differ, but once it starts they become fixated and refuse to let go. Wazuka was known as a lover of mazes, and even among dragons, he was considered very powerful. He spent huge effort making his nest confusing and deadly, using Titan, Dwarf, Human, and Elven techniques, anything that could make it more complex. No ordinary person could deal with a monster like that. Zeke grew uneasy because he thought all the dangerous parts had been wiped out 20 years ago with dwarf and elf help. But the blacksmith finished another barrel and said Wazuka had kidnapped over 1,000 dwarves. He had no idea how humans managed to catch that dragon, but he was sure it didn't happen inside the maze. Someone must have drawn it out and killed it elsewhere. If the dragon had stayed inside, no group could have captured it, no matter what tools they used. And if the maze hadn't changed in 20 years, the blacksmith was sure that was only the surface. Something much worse had to be hidden deeper inside, and no one knew how the maze would react if people entered again. Seeing Zeke's face, the blacksmith guessed some fools had already messed with it. He said if anything happened in that maze, they'd learn a hard lesson, but maybe some smart person would be able to conquer the dungeon instead. By then, Jaryong had already arrived at the training center in Feng, the former maze. Everyone was told to gather, then pick up their pass and contract in Zone B1. The field had been rebuilt into a maze with zones of different themes and difficulty levels, and that much had already been announced. Saram said this was the first time they were using the new test site, so nobody had inside information, though that might actually help MC. A lot more people had shown up too. Jaryong smiled and said her cousin had done a great job, because he could feel a huge number of stares, angry ones that wanted to tear them apart. Xiaobei glanced around because she knew Anisha would pull something, but 20 people was way too many, and strangely, she couldn't even feel those eyes on herself. At the same time, he realized his training hadn't been wasted. Over the past month, he had learned how to sense when someone had him in their sights, that creepy feeling like a bad dream. Sekiram compared it to that gross moment when you suddenly open a window on a hot summer day. For a whole month, Xiaoryong had risked his life in a high-level dungeon. Because of that, he learned a lot, including how to avoid danger before it locked onto him. But this feeling was far stronger, like he'd been targeted many times over. In a moment like this, the least he could do was greet them back. No matter what, he couldn't show weakness, so he let his energy spill out until everyone nearby felt it. About 50 minutes before the practical exam, people were gathered in conference hall, one at the Fang Training Center. They were thanking each other for helping make this huge event happen. One of them was the Hunter Association director, ranked 12th in South Korea. Then Go Dok-soo, the current headmaster, spoke up and said he had never supported such a rushed and reckless plan. In his view, it was foolish to think a stunt like this would win people over. He said people want honesty, not some flashy new event. Still, as an employee, he had to go along with the majority. He added that if anyone deserved thanks, it was the girl sitting in front of him, the real one running the school, even if her title was board chairman of the hero school. She said she understood how everyone felt, but asked him not to say anything that would stir things up. After all, the whole council had worked on this for a long time. Even so, nobody really bought it, since everyone knew connections had decided a lot of this. Then a bald man in a fancy red robe chimed in, saying they were making too big a deal out of this, since it wasn't even the main exam. It was only an extra test for a small group of top students, so he didn't get the outrage. Others quickly shut him down, telling him to sit quietly, unless age had made him forget what he was like 30 years ago. They reminded him that none of the kids outside deserved to be looked down on. Hearing that, the girl warned that if anyone started another argument, she was ready to answer in kind, since the headmaster and the board already had enough conflict. Everyone there knew those tensions would explode someday. They just didn't expect it to happen like this. Then an applicant who had nothing to do with their argument showed up, and they all felt his aura at once. Every eye turned toward the street. Around them, the same old man stepped out of the office and started talking with another teacher. He told him that another teacher should be the real target of criticism, because there wasn't a hunter in Korea who didn't know the association chairman was basically someone's lapdog. He then asked Teacher Kang if that sounded too harsh. Kang admitted the wording was a bit strong, but the old man could tell he agreed. Once people get power, they always want to use all of it. Still, he wondered if they hadn't gone too far, because every school should be trying to win graduates fairly by offering the best fit. Instead, some places were pulling in students who only cared about perks, not effort or skill, but connections, money, and fame. The old man said that in a few years, there might not be any young hunters left with real promise. Too many were satisfied with easy rewards, and later they'd grow into adults chasing nothing but outside benefits. A fish trapped in a well can't fight the sky that feeds it. He even suspected this exam happened because of a single request from the chairman, so most of the people showing up today would probably be relatives or friends. Then he again asked Teacher Kang if he was being too harsh. He said it wasn't enough that their own students had already left, now people were pressuring the ones still there too. Did that mean he and the whole school meant nothing? Kang told him not to worry, and the old man agreed. Then he brought up the strange aura everyone had felt. They laughed it off, saying it might at least make things a little interesting, because a guy like that would be hard to ignore. Maybe he was acting this way on purpose, which made it even funnier. The old man even wanted that student to get in. As a director, he might not allow it openly, but he hadn't felt this eager to test a student in a long time. Soon after the teachers wrapped up, the students were briefed on the exam topic: finding and carrying out a treasure. To pass, they had to locate a chest inside the dungeon, recover the treasure, and bring it back out. This was all explained on a giant screen 30 minutes before the test. Jerryong listened closely, and the rules were way simpler than he expected. He thought there'd be some complicated scoring system. He also signed a waiver in case he got hurt. The big point was that even if everyone passed, treasures would still remain in the dungeon. There was no limit on how many could pass, but if even a quarter of the group went in, that was already over 100 people. The teacher finished by saying there was more to explain later, but for now they could head to the exam field. That was where the equipment was waiting. Jerryong was annoyed that he couldn't use the phone he had turned in, but he still figured he and Sairam would meet face to face soon enough. Just then, he spotted two huge guys blocking another student. The boy said his leg was hurt, so he was moving slowly and had bumped into them by mistake. The two looked ready to start beating him up. Xiao Beiyong stepped in and told them to knock it off. Of course, the pair acted confident, since there were two of them and both were bigger. But once the protagonist lowered his aura and said they were getting on his nerves, he made it clear the law was the only thing holding him back, and inside the exam, things might be different. After they backed off, MC picked up the boy's book and handed it back. The student said he didn't have to do that, but Zhao Beiyong helped him anyway, and wished him luck on the test. Seeing the prep book in his hand, he figured he was taking this seriously. That boy was Pyo Du Jin, 18 years old, and last year he ranked second in the overall freshman assessment. By then, everyone had gathered at the maze entrance in the training center. There were only 10 minutes left before the exam began. They told everyone to follow instructions and move to their assigned entrance. What stood out to Jiaoyong was how much it all felt like a sci-fi movie, because they had to step into these strange capsule-like pods. Once inside, they were told the doors would open when the countdown ended and the exam would start. The capsules felt like elevators, and each person got a tactical bracelet that tracked the time, their condition, and their location. Only 5 seconds remained. The Fang Labyrinth used to be called the Baskin Abyss, and plenty of hunters had doubted whether it was safe as a training ground. But even they had no idea what this maze could really hide. It followed its own rules, and deceived anyone who tried to use it. Then Zhao Beiyong felt something was off. The elevator was acting strange. The system suddenly started blaring for everyone to get out of the maze, warning that an emergency had started, and the internal structure was changing. At last the truth came out. The maze wasn't a test site, but a predator, swallowing them as prey. These people had walked right into a dragon maze with no master. If you made it this far, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment.